Medieval women would absolutely hate you. Doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, they'd find pretty much everything about you offensive, even blasphemous. So what was life actually like for women back then? So yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week someone from Canada said they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. Okay, tonight it's medieval Europe. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes flutter open to darkness. The straw mattress crackles beneath you as you shift, every piece of hay announcing your movement. It's cold. Bone-chilling cold that seeps through the thin woolen blanket covering your body. Your breath forms little clouds that vanish into the blackness above. You're not alone. Never alone. The warmth of bodies press against you. Your sisters, perhaps a cousin or two, maybe even a servant girl at the foot of the bed. In the 14th century, privacy isn't a concept anyone understands. Your family sleeps together not just for warmth, but because that's just what people do. Get up, hisses your mother's voice through the darkness. The bells for prime will be ringing soon. And there it is, the distant toll of church bells cutting through the pre-dawn silence. Not like your phone alarm that you can hit snooze on. These bells command the entire village to wake. But it's still dark, you want to say, snuggling deeper into your scratchy blanket. But you don't. You can't. Because in medieval Europe, especially for a woman, religious obligations aren't optional. Wait, let me paint this picture better. Imagine waking up every single day of your life not because you have work or school, but because if you don't get to church, your soul might literally burn in hell for eternity. That's the reality for a medieval woman. The fear is real, palpable, as physical as the cold wooden floor beneath your bare feet as you slide out of bed. You might be thinking, well, I'm religious too, I pray sometimes. No, no, no. You don't understand. Medieval religion wasn't the casual thoughts and prayers thing we do now. These people were intense. I mean, picture this. You're in church. The priest is describing Christ's passion, the whipping, the crown of thorns, the nails, and suddenly the entire congregation is sobbing uncontrollably. Not quiet tears. We're talking full body, snot running, can't catch your breath wailing. Some people are so overcome they rush toward the altar, trying to touch the priest. Others collapse to the ground, overcome by emotion. And you know what? This wasn't considered weird or excessive. This was normal. This was expected. I don't think I could do that, you might be thinking as you adjust your comfy pillow. And that's exactly the point. A medieval woman would look at your restrained emotions and think something was deeply wrong with you. Your chill, laid-back demeanor wouldn't be seen as cool. It would be suspicious. Like, what are you hiding? Why aren't you showing proper devotion? Take Marjorie Kempe, for instance. She was this English mystic in the 15th century, and she was famous for her extreme religious experiences. This woman would sob so loudly during church services that she disrupted entire congregations. People complained about her, but many also respected her intense spirituality. She once described how she felt Christ speaking directly to her, saying, "You shall have as much reward in heaven for your good will and your good desires as if you had done all those good deeds that you would do if you could." Can you imagine someone today claiming to have regular conversations with Jesus and actually being taken seriously? They'd be medicated faster than you can say psychiatric evaluation. The guard at the church door gives you a nod as you file in with the rest of your family. The stone floor is ice cold beneath your feet, and the smell hits you. Incense, sweat, and the faint lingering scent of yesterday's prayers. As the priest begins to speak, you feel it happening around you. First a sniffle, then a sob. Soon the whole congregation is caught up in a wave of religious emotion. Your mother clutches your arm, tears streaming down her face as she gazes at the crucifix. "Why aren't you crying?" she whispers harshly, noticing your dry eyes. And here's where it gets weird. You actually start to feel guilty for not feeling enough, not demonstrating enough. Medieval women were expected to be emotional, to wear their religious devotion on their sleeves. A stoic face in church? That's the medieval equivalent of scrolling Instagram during a funeral. Speaking of women and religion, it's one of the few areas where medieval women actually found some equality. Yeah, I know, shocking. Excuse me, I hear you say? Equality in the Middle Ages? No way. But here's the thing. While medieval society was absolutely patriarchal in most ways, religion sort of acted as a great equalizer. Everyone, from king to peasant, had to confess their sins. Everyone had to follow the church's rules, and women could achieve spiritual fame through their devotion. Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl who led armies because she heard divine voices. Christine de Pizan, the first professional female writer in Europe who argued for women's education and respect. Hildegard of Bingen, a nun who became one of the most important composers, writers and philosophers of her time. These weren't just token women, they were legitimately respected, sometimes feared, for their spiritual insights. When Hildegard spoke, emperors listened. But didn't the church also burn women as witches and stuff, you might ask? Well, yes and no. The major witch hunts actually came later, in the 16th and 17th centuries. During the 14th and 15th centuries, we're talking about, religious women were often viewed as having special connections to God. The smell of breakfast wafts through the air as you return home from morning prayers, a thin gruel with perhaps a chunk of dark bread if you're lucky. Your stomach growls. In your cozy bed at home, you might reach for a midnight snack or order delivery any time. Here, food is never guaranteed. Your mother is already at the cooking fire, stirring the pot with practiced movements. "The fire needs tending," she says without looking up. That's your cue. As a medieval woman, your day is structured around work. Constant, physically demanding work. From tending fires to spinning wool, from feeding animals to helping with the harvest, medieval women didn't just keep house, they were essential to survival. In fact, let me tell you something that might surprise you. Medieval marriage records often list the wife's occupation separately from her husband's. Women weren't just farmers' wives, they were brewers, bakers, spinners, weavers, and merchants in their own right. A woman named Agnes Halliday in 14th century London was recorded as a fishwife, not meaning she was nagging, but that she was a fish seller with her own business. Another woman, Emma Copister, was listed as an upholster, meaning she made cushions and mattresses. The bread needs kneading, your mother reminds you, and you plunge your hands into the cold, stiff dough. Your fingers ache from the pressure, from the repetitive motion that will eventually transform this lump into something edible. Medieval women's hands told their life stories, calloused, cracked, permanently stained. Not the manicured nails you might sport today. The baker's wife had burns on her forearms. The dyer's hands were permanently stained blue or red. A spinster, literal meaning, a woman who spins, had fingers grooved from years of twisting thread. The first light of dawn finally breaks through the small window of your home, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The day has officially begun, though you've already been awake for hours. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a bucket of water. Not a mirror, those are far too expensive for common folk. Your hair is covered with the simple linen headcloth, as unmarried women could wear their hair loose. But once married, keeping it covered was expected. Today, we'd call this modesty culture restrictive. Back then, it was just the way things were. As the day progresses, you fall into the rhythm of work that defines a medieval woman's existence. Unlike today's world, where we're often paralysed by choice, medieval women's paths were largely predetermined. You knew exactly what was expected of you, what your future would hold. Is there something almost comforting in that certainty? Maybe. But don't get too comfortable with the idea, because while the path was clear, it was also incredibly difficult. The wool needs carding before spinning, your mother tells you, handing over a clump of raw sheep's wool still greasy with lanolin that will chap your hands raw by evening. I showed you yesterday how to hold the cards, she says, demonstrating once more how to pull the wire brushes against each other, aligning the fibres so they can be spun into thread. Your modern fingers struggle with the motion, and you can almost feel your mother's exasperation. In medieval times, girls as young as 4 or 5 would begin learning these skills. By your age, you'd have been expertly preparing wool for years. The sound of hoofbeats outside draws your attention. Through the small window, you catch a glimpse of richly dressed riders, nobles perhaps, or wealthy merchants. Don't gawk, your mother scolds. It's not proper. And here we enter another aspect of medieval womanhood, reputation. Your reputation wasn't just about social standing, it was currency, especially for women. A woman with a sullied reputation might never marry, might be cast out from her community, might literally starve. Imagine living in a world where a single rumour could destroy your entire life, where every move you made was scrutinised for propriety, where your greatest asset wasn't your intelligence or skills, but your perceived virtue. Did you hear about Millicent's daughter? You overhear a neighbour whispering to your mother later that day at the well. Seen talking alone with the baker's son behind the church. Her prospects are ruined now, mark my words. Your mother makes the sign of the cross. Lord have mercy on her. And after her parents worked so hard to arrange that match with the carpenter's family. The weight of these expectations presses down on you like a physical force. No wonder medieval women seem so solemn in paintings. They're carrying the burden of impossible standards. The day wears on. Your back aches from stooping over the wool. Your fingers are raw from the lanolin and the constant motion of the carding combs. Yet there's no rest. There's bread to bake, water to fetch, animals to feed, younger siblings to mind. You take a moment, just a brief pause to stretch your aching muscles. Through the doorway, you can see other women moving through the village, each engaged in their own labour. There's a sense of community in this shared experience of work. Every woman you know lives this same rhythm of prayer and labour, season after season, year after year. The afternoon sun slants through the window. Soon it will be time for vespers, evening prayers, another trip to the church, another round of public devotion. You wonder, as perhaps medieval women sometimes did, if there could be more to life than this endless cycle. But such thoughts themselves might be considered sinful. Pride, discontent, ingratitude for God's plan. These were dangerous feelings for a medieval soul. The church bells begin to toll again, calling the faithful to prayer. Your mother sets aside her work with a sigh, wiping her hands on her apron. "Come," she says, "we mustn't be late." And so you follow, stepping back into the well-worn path that generations of medieval women walked before you. As you enter the church once more, the smell of incense envelops you, and the sounds of devotion, murmured prayers, soft weeping, create a tapestry of faith that feels both foreign and strangely compelling. This is the world of medieval women, a world where emotion was not hidden but displayed, where faith wasn't private but communal, where life was simultaneously more certain and more precarious than anything we know today. As the congregation begins to pray, you find yourself wondering, in this world so different from your own, what would tomorrow bring? The afternoon sun slants through the church windows, casting coloured light across the worn stone floor. Vespers is over, but there's a special sermon today. The priest's voice echoes through the sanctuary as he describes the torments of hell awaiting those who stray from virtue. Next to you, a woman sobs openly, her shoulders shaking. Another has fallen to her knees, face buried in her hands. This isn't unusual or extreme, this is Tuesday. When the priest describes how Christ was scourged, the entire congregation gasps as one. You can feel the collective pain, the shared suffering. It's like nothing that exists in our modern world, where we keep emotions carefully contained behind polite smiles and professional demeanours. God sees your devotion, the priest reminds everyone, his voice rising. He sees into your heart. He knows if your faith is true. And that's the thing that's so hard to understand about medieval women. Their emotional lives were lived inside out. What we hide, they displayed. What we consider private, they made public. Outside the church, life resumes its rhythm. You follow your mother home, careful to keep your eyes downcast when passing the group of men gathered near the well. Being noticed is rarely good for a woman of modest means. "Did you hear about Lady Eleanor?" one of the village women whispers to your mother as you pass. "They say Sir William has written her another poem, compared her beauty to the sunrise and her virtue to, well, I can't remember what, but something holy." Your mother clucks her tongue. His poor wife. That's the third lady he's dedicated verses to this year. And here we are at one of the strangest aspects of medieval life for women, chivalry and courtly love. So this is wild. Knights and noblemen would publicly pine for women who were often already married to someone else. They'd write elaborate poems praising their beauty, their virtue, their mercy. They'd perform ridiculous feats to prove their devotion. And this wasn't considered adultery or inappropriate. It was actually celebrated. Hold up, I hear you say. So these dudes could basically hit on married women and that was fine? Well, yes and no. The whole thing was supposed to be pure, unconsummated love from afar. The knight was meant to improve himself through his devotion to his lady, not actually hook up with her. Though let's be real, sometimes things definitely crossed the line. But here's the really weird part. If a nobleman wrote you poetry comparing your eyes to stars and your skin to lilies, you were expected to be cruel to him. Like, actively mean. The harder to obtain, the more virtuous the lady. I'm not making this up. There are actual medieval handbooks about how ladies should respond to suitors, with disdain, with coldness, with challenges that might literally get the guy killed. Remember Lady Catherine, your mother continues as you walk. Sir Roderick wore her glove in his helmet for 3 tournaments, got his nose broken in the second one. She never even spoke to him, just watched from the stands. And then married the merchant from London, another woman adds with a laugh. Think about that. In medieval romance, the biggest turn-on was rejection. The more a woman said no, the more devoted her suitor became. which is pretty much the opposite of modern dating, where not answering a text for an hour might get you ghosted. So what if a woman actually liked a guy back, you might wonder? Tough luck. Responding too quickly or too warmly would make her seem easy, desperate, lacking in virtue. The game was rigged from the start. Back home, the evening chores await. No matter what class you belonged to in medieval society, a woman's day was filled with work. For peasant women, that meant preparing food, tending animals, spinning, weaving, brewing, and 100 other tasks essential to survival. For noble women, it meant overseeing servants, managing household accounts, and producing elaborate embroidery or music to showcase their refinement. As the light begins to fade, your mother hands you a spindle weighted with unspun wool. "We need more thread for weaving," she says. "Your sister will help with the bread." Your fingers work the wool, drawing it out and twisting it into thread. The motion is hypnotic, almost meditative. For a medieval woman, spinning wasn't just a chore, it was so fundamental to female identity that unmarried women were literally called spinsters. "Did you hear about the argument at the guild meeting?" your sister asks as she kneads the dough. "Hush," your mother says sharply. "That's not for young ears." But you've heard the whispers. In towns, women were fighting for the right to practice trades independently. Some guilds accepted female members, others barred them completely. A woman might be a successful brewer or baker one day, only to find men changing the rules to exclude her the next. "Agnes the weaver said they're trying to stop women from selling cloth at market," your sister continues, ignoring the warning. "Says it's not proper." Your mother sighs. Agnes should worry about her own business. Her last batch of cloth was so poorly woven you could see through it. This casual conversation reveals something fascinating about medieval women. They weren't passive victims of their society. They pushed back. They found loopholes. They built businesses and fought for their rights to practice trades. Take Eleanor Reichner, who ran a successful embroidery business in 14th century London. When the Embroiderers Guild tried to limit women's participation, she found male sponsors to speak for her at guild meetings. She couldn't vote or hold office, but she made sure her voice was heard. Or consider the Brewsters, female brewers who dominated the beer industry until men decided brewing was profitable and pushed them out. Before that, brewing ale was considered women's work, just another household task like baking bread. Night falls quickly, and the small fire in the hearth provides the only light. Modern darkness is never truly dark. We have streetlights, phone screens, the glow from microwaves and alarm clocks. But medieval darkness was absolute. When the sun set and the fire died, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. "Tell me again about when you were my age," your younger sister asks your mother, her voice small in the growing shadows. Your mother's hands never stop moving. Even in near darkness she continues to spin. "I was apprenticed to the village midwife," she says, "learning which herbs help with pain, how to turn a baby that's coming wrong." "Did you want to be a midwife?" your sister asks. Your mother pauses. "Want," she repeats, as if the word doesn't quite make sense. "It was a good skill, respected. My mother arranged it with Goody Ann when I was 9. And there's another way medieval women's lives differed from ours. The concept of personal choice, of following your passion, simply didn't exist for most people. You didn't become something. You were born into it. The daughter of a baker learned to bake. The daughter of a farmer learned to farm. Occasionally a girl might be apprenticed to learn a specific trade, but these arrangements were made by parents, not by personal choice. But what if someone didn't want to do what their parents did, you might wonder? The question itself is anachronistic. Medieval people didn't think in terms of individual fulfillment. You did what your family needed you to do, what your community expected of you. That said, there were rare exceptions. Women who felt called to religious life could sometimes persuade their families to let them enter convents, though this often required a financial contribution that poor families couldn't afford. A clatter outside makes everyone jump. Your father, returning from the fields, stomps his feet at the threshold to knock off the mud. "God's blessing on this house," he says as he enters, the traditional greeting. "And on you," your mother responds. He drops heavily onto the bench by the fire. "John's cow died," he announces. "Just dropped. In the field." A ripple of alarm passes through the room. A dead cow isn't just sad news, it's catastrophic for a medieval family. It means no milk, no cheese, no butter. It means no calf in the spring to sell at market or to increase the herd. It means potential starvation. "Mary, Mother of God, protect them," your mother murmurs, making the sign of the cross. "We should share our cheese," you suggest. Your father gives you a sharp look. "And go hungry ourselves?" John should have taken better care of his animal. "Jesus teaches charity," you counter, then immediately regret it when you see your father's expression darken. "The priest teaches women to hold their tongues," he replies. "Mind yourself." And here we have another reality check about medieval women's lives. While religious devotion was expected and respected in women, actually interpreting religious texts or challenging male authority using religious arguments, that was dangerous territory. Joan of Arc learned this the hard way. When captured by the English, her claims of divine guidance were used against her. Wearing men's clothing, cutting her hair short, and claiming direct communication with God, these became evidence of witchcraft and heresy rather than holiness. The same religious fervour that made her a leader also led to her death. The fire crackles, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, an owl hoots, and something small scurries across the thatch roof overhead. "I saw Lady Anne today," your father says, accepting a cup of thin ale from your mother, being carried to church in her litter, surrounded by servants like she's the Queen herself. Lady Anne is the Lord's wife, a figure of both envy and resentment in the village. Her life is as different from yours as yours is from your cat's. She sleeps on feather beds, wears silk and fur, and has servants to handle every task from dressing her hair to cutting her meat. They say she brought 3 wagons of goods when she married, your mother says. Silver plates, tapestries from France, a mirror made of real glass. For all her finery, she's given the Lord no sons, your father replies with a dismissive gesture. 4 daughters and not 1 boy. Her position isn't as secure as she thinks. And there's the brutal reality of noble marriage. A woman's primary value was in her fertility, specifically her ability to produce male heirs. No matter how beautiful, wealthy, or well-connected, failure to produce a son could result in abandonment, divorce on flimsy grounds, or even accusations of witchcraft. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women in medieval Europe, was imprisoned for 16 years by her husband, King Henry II, after supporting their son's rebellion against him. Even queens weren't immune to male authority. Lady Anne's daughters are beautiful, though, your sister says dreamily. Their dresses at Christmas Mass had real gold thread. Your father snorts. Beauty without virtue is worthless, and virtue without obedience is worse. It's easy from our modern perspective to judge medieval parents for these harsh attitudes. But try to understand, they were preparing their daughters for the world as it existed, not as they wished it to be. A disobedient daughter might be beaten by her husband. An immodest daughter might never marry at all. Survival meant conformity. The evening meal is simple, a pottage of beans and a small piece of hard bread. You eat with your fingers, as forks won't become common for centuries yet. The wooden bowl is shared among family members, each taking turns to dip their bread and scoop the beans. Tomorrow we'll take the cloth to market, your mother says. The blue should fetch a good price. The blue she refers to is wool dyed with woad, a plant that produces a coveted blue colour. Medieval women were often responsible for dyeing cloth, a complex process involving mordants to set the colour and careful timing to achieve the right shade. The blue on your hands isn't dirt, it's evidence of skilled labour. "Can I come?" your younger sister asks eagerly. Your mother exchanges a glance with your father. "You're old enough," she says finally, "but you'll stay with me every moment. The market is no place for a girl to wander." Markets were both opportunity and danger for medieval women. They offered a chance to sell goods, to see new faces, to hear news from other villages or even distant cities. But they also brought strangers whose intentions might not be honourable, merchants who might try to cheat a woman they perceived as naive, and crowds where a young girl could easily be separated from her family. "I heard Lady Anne's oldest is to be betrothed," your father says, changing the subject, "to some lord's son from the north. They say the dowry is 30 silver marks, a betrothal." Another concept that's almost impossible for us to relate to today. Medieval girls, especially noble ones, might be promised in marriage as young as 7 or 8, though the actual marriage would usually wait until they were at least 12. And before you recoil in horror, yes, 12 is shockingly young by our standards. But historical context matters here. In a world where the average life expectancy hovered around 35, if you survived childhood, waiting until your 20s to marry would have seemed bizarre. Most people were considered adults by their early teens. 30 marks, your mother repeats, clearly impressed. That would buy half the village. Marriage, for medieval women of all classes, was primarily an economic arrangement. Love might grow later, but it wasn't the foundation. Parents sought advantageous matches that would improve the family's financial security, forge beneficial alliances, or at least provide enough combined resources for the new couple to survive. The fire has burned low, and your father yawns widely. "To bed," he announces. "Dawn comes early." The sleeping arrangements are nothing like your comfortable modern bedroom. The entire family sleeps in one room. Parents, children, sometimes grandparents, or unmarried aunts and uncles. Privacy isn't just limited. The concept barely exists. You lie on your shared mattress, pulled from its daytime storage and laid on the floor. The straw inside crackles as you settle, and somewhere in the darkness, you hear a mouse scurry across the floor. Your sister's warm body presses against yours, her breath evening out as she drifts to sleep. Above you, the thatch rustles as night birds move among the eaves. Tomorrow will be another day of work, prayer, and careful navigation of social expectations. As you drift towards sleep, you can't help but wonder, what dreams filled a medieval woman's head? Did she long for freedom she couldn't name? Did she question the strictures that bound her life? Or did she simply accept the world as she found it, finding purpose in the roles available to her? The last ember in the fire winks out, and darkness takes the room completely. In the distance, a wolf howls, and your father turns restlessly in his sleep. Unlike your cosy modern bed with its soft mattress and climate control, this medieval night is filled with discomforts. the hard floor beneath the thin mattress, the prickle of straw, the cold that seeps through every crack and crevice of the simple home. But medieval people developed remarkable adaptations to these conditions. The entire family sleeping together generated enough body heat to keep the worst of the cold at bay. Sleeping half sitting up, medieval beds were often shorter than modern ones, reduced the risk of night vapours entering the body. Even the practice of sleeping naked, common in some regions, had practical value. It allowed clothes to air out and reduced the spread of lice and fleas. Sleep wasn't the uninterrupted 8 hours we aim for today. Medieval people practiced what historians call segmented sleep. They'd go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for about 4 hours, first sleep, then wake for an hour or two around midnight. During this waking period they might pray, talk quietly, make love, or even visit neighbours before returning to their second sleep until dawn. The church bell tolls midnight, marking the division between these sleep phases. Your eyes open briefly at the familiar sound. Beside you, your mother stirs, whispering a prayer before settling back into the darkness. Tomorrow brings market day, another link in the endless chain of medieval existence. But for now, sleep claims you, carrying you away from the physical discomforts into dreams, perhaps not so different from those dreamed by women across the centuries. Morning arrives with a riot of sounds. Roosters crow, dogs bark, and the early bell for lords rings out across the village. Your eyes open to dim light filtering through the shutters. Another day begins. Market day. There's a different energy in the house today. Your mother is already up, sorting through the dyed wool cloth that represents months of labour. Shearing, washing, carding, spinning, weaving, dyeing. This isn't just busy work. This cloth is currency. The blue should fetch at least 3 pennies a yard, she says, running her hands over the fabric. And the russet too. You might be thinking, big deal, a few pennies. But in a world where a skilled labourer might earn 2 pennies a day, this cloth represents serious value. The blue, dyed with expensive woad, is particularly precious. Your family might use that money to pay taxes, buy salt for preserving meat, or purchase iron tools that couldn't be made at home. Wear your good kirtle, your mother tells you, pulling out the slightly less patched garment saved for Sundays and special occasions, and your clean head cloth. Appearance matters at market, not just for vanity's sake, but because how you present yourself affects how merchants treat you, what prices they offer, whether they attempt to cheat you. A woman who looks respectable will get better treatment than one who appears poor or slovenly. The morning bustle feels familiar now. The hurried breakfast of cold porridge left from last night, the careful wrapping of cloth in oiled skins to protect it from dust or rain, the filling of a small basket with bread and cheese for midday. Your father has already left for the fields, but he'll join you at market later. Your younger brother is tasked with minding the animals while the rest of you are away. Stay within sight, your mother warns your sister as you set out toward the village centre. The morning air is crisp and dew soaks the hem of your kirtle as you walk the narrow path. Market day is held in the churchyard, sacred ground where, theoretically at least, everyone is bound to honest dealing. As you approach, the sounds intensify, merchants calling their wares, animals squawking and bleating, the metal-on-metal ring of the blacksmith already at work. The smell hits you next, a complex mixture of livestock, food, people and goods from far-flung places, cinnamon and pepper from the spice merchant, tanned leather, fresh bread, the sharp tang of the fishmonger's stall. "Mary, over here!" A woman waves from beneath a small canopy where she's selling eggs and cheese. It's Agnes, your mother's friend from the next village. How's the cloth this time? Agnes asks, examining your mother's goods with an expert eye. Better than Margaret's, I hope. She used too much alum in her dye batch, turned everything an odd shade. Medieval gossip wasn't just idle chatter. It was information sharing, quality control, market intelligence. Women's networks spread news about which merchants were fair, which were cheating on weights and measures, which dye techniques were yielding the best results. Lady Anne's new steward is here, Agnes says in a lower voice, nodding toward a well-dressed man examining wool at another stall. They say he drives a harder bargain than the old one. Your mother frowns. The old one was fair. Let's hope this one doesn't think he can cheat village women who don't know their sums. Don't let anyone tell you medieval women were uneducated in practical matters. While formal book learning was rare, most women were highly skilled in the mathematics of their daily lives, calculating proportions for dye recipes, measuring ingredients for bread that would feed exactly the right number of people, tracking complex household accounts. Christine de Pizan, that remarkable 15th century writer, was unusual in her formal education, but she specifically praised ordinary women's practical knowledge. If women had written the books, she noted, they would have written them differently, for women know they are falsely accused. Speaking of Christine, let's shift our perspective for a bit. While your family is selling cloth at market, what's happening up at the manor house where Lady Anne lives? The stone walls of the manor rise above the village, solid and imposing. Inside, Lady Anne has been awake for hours, though her day started quite differently from yours. Her serving woman helped her dress in a gown of fine wool trimmed with squirrel fur, her hair carefully arranged beneath the silk head covering. She's already attended morning mass in the manor's private chapel, and broken her fast with white bread, fresh butter, and watered wine. Now she sits in her solar, a private upper room reserved for the noble family, with an account book open before her. The south field yielded less than expected, she tells her steward, the very man spotted at market. Make sure to check for drainage issues before the next planting. Wait, I hear you asking, wasn't she just a decorative noblewoman? Why is she worrying about crop yields? Because that's the reality history often glosses over. Medieval noblewomen weren't just pretty ornaments. While their husbands might be away at war, on pilgrimage, or attending the king, these women managed vast estates, supervised dozens or even hundreds of workers, oversaw agricultural production, and handled complex finances. When her husband rode off to fight, a noblewoman effectively became CEO of what was often the equivalent of a major agricultural corporation. She needed to understand crop rotation, animal husbandry, weather patterns, labour management, and financial planning. The new bailiff at the Western Manor claims the mill needs repairs, Lady Anne continues. Send someone trustworthy to verify before authorising payment. Trust me, you wouldn't want to try cheating Lady Anne. Beneath the silks and fur is a sharp mind that can calculate how many bushels of grain should come from each field and exactly how much tax is owed to the penny. A young serving girl enters, curtsying deeply. My lady, the seamstress is here with the new gowns for your daughters. Lady Anne nods. Show her in. And bring the chest with the old gowns that need altering. Clothing represents another sharp divide between classes. While your family might own 2 outfits each, one for everyday wear and one for special occasions, Lady Anne's daughters each have multiple gowns made of finer materials. They don't patch and mend endlessly like your family. They pass down still good clothing to servants and commission new pieces regularly. The seamstress enters, arms laden with folded garments. She's from the village. In fact, she's the mother of a girl you sometimes play with after church. Seeing her here is a reminder of how the noble and common worlds intersect. Lady Anne might seem distant and unapproachable, but she relies on village women for essential services. The blue suits Lady Eleanor's colouring beautifully, the seamstress says, displaying a gown of fine wool dyed a deep, rich blue, probably using the same woad that coloured your mother's cloth, though in greater quantity and with more expensive mordants to set the colour. She'll wear it for the feast when Lord Robert's family visits next month, Lady Anne says. There's a slight tightness around her eyes as she says this. Lord Robert's family. The seamstress gives Lady Anne a knowing look. Lord Robert has a son of marriageable age, and Lady Eleanor at 14 is ready for betrothal. The girl is fortunate, the seamstress says carefully. They say young Lord William is handsome and well-mannered. Lady Anne's expression doesn't change. Fortunate indeed, if the match proceeds. Lord Robert's lands adjoin ours to the north. The alliance would be advantageous. What goes unsaid is that Lady Eleanor has never met Lord William, that her opinion on the match matters not at all, that she is, essentially, a valuable commodity being traded to cement a political and economic alliance. Nearby, in a window seat overlooking the garden, Lady Eleanor herself sits with her sisters. They're supposed to be practicing embroidery, but their heads are bent together in whispered conversation. They say he was hurt in a tournament last summer, the younger sister says. A lance splinter in his eye. Eleanor's fingers tighten on her embroidery hoop. That's just a rumour, Matilda. Stop trying to frighten me. I'm not, Matilda protests. Agnes heard it from her cousin who serves in Lord Robert's household. Embroidery forgotten, Eleanor stares out the window. What's going through her mind? Is she frightened? Resigned? Perhaps even a little curious about the young man who might become her husband? I want you to understand something important here. We often imagine that medieval women, especially noble ones, were passive victims in these arranged marriages. But historical records tell a more complex story. While they rarely had the power to refuse outright, women found ways to influence the process. Some young women appealed to sympathetic relatives to intervene on their behalf. Others negotiated through their confessors. A few bold ones even appealed directly to church courts if they found their prospective husbands truly objectionable. And once married, noble women often wielded considerable informal power within their households. Mother is watching, warns Eleanor's middle sister Catherine. Look busy before she scolds us. The girls immediately return to their embroidery, needles flashing in the sunlight. They're creating an altar cloth for the church, incorporating gold thread and tiny seed pearls into the design. This isn't merely decorative work. Religious embroidery was considered a form of devotion, a way for noble women to contribute to the church while displaying their wealth and skill. Back at the market, your mother has successfully sold most of her cloth. The blue went quickly, purchased by a merchant who will likely resell it at an even higher price in the town 15 miles away. The russet took longer, but eventually sold to the innkeeper's wife for new bed hangings. 3 silver pennies and 2 farthings, your mother counts, carefully securing the coins in a small pouch tied to her belt. A good day's work. Can we see the spice merchant? Your sister asks hopefully. Exotic spices are rare treats for common folk, used sparingly for special occasions, your mother considers. A pinch of cinnamon for Christmas baking, she agrees, but first we need salt. Salt, another commodity we take completely for granted today. In medieval times, it was essential not just for flavouring food, but for preserving meat through the winter. Without refrigeration, a family's survival might depend on properly salted bacon and beef. As you make your way through the crowded market, a commotion near the church gate catches your attention. A group of richly dressed riders has arrived, nobles from the look of their clothing and mounts. "Make way for Lord William of Harwood," calls a servant riding ahead of the main party. A ripple of whispers spreads through the market. Lord William, the very man Lady Eleanor might be betrothed to. The crowd parts as the riders pass, common folk pressing against stalls to make room. The young nobleman at the centre of the party is perhaps 18, straight-backed on a glossy black horse. He's conventionally handsome, with dark hair and the confident expression of someone who's never had to question his place in the world. "He's come to see Lady Eleanor," someone murmurs nearby, "to approve the match before the contracts are signed." Your sister gapes openly, but your mother pulls her back. "Don't stare," she hisses. "It's not proper." As the riders pass, Lord William's gaze sweeps the market casually, the way you might glance at trees or buildings, noting their existence without really seeing them. To him, the villagers are background scenery, not individuals with complex lives. When his eye happens to pass over you, there's no flicker of recognition that you're a thinking, feeling human being just like him. This is the reality of class in medieval Europe. It's not just about money or comfort, it's about visibility, about whether your humanity is fully recognized by those with power over your life. "Salt," your mother reminds you, pulling you away from the spectacle and toward a merchant with barrels of greyish crystal. "Before it's all gone." Meanwhile, up at the manor, news of Lord William's approach has thrown the household into disarray. "He's early," Lady Anne says, a rare note of alarm in her voice. "The feast wasn't planned until next month." The steward bows. "My lady, it seems he was hunting in the royal forest nearby and decided to pay his respects while in the area." Lady Anne's mind works quickly, calculating what can be prepared on short notice that will properly honour an important guest without appearing too eager. "Kill 2 of the capons," she instructs a servant, "and bring up the good Gascon wine. Eleanor, Catherine, change into your best gowns immediately. Matilda, you'll eat in the nursery tonight." "But mother," protests the youngest. "Not another word," Lady Anne cuts her off. "Go now and tell your nurse to make you presentable. You may come down to be introduced briefly before the meal, but that's all." The girls scatter to obey, and Lady Anne turns to the steward. "Has my husband been informed?" "A messenger was dispatched to the south field, my lady. He should return soon." Lady Anne nods. "Good. Now see that the hall is prepared properly. The best silver, the painted tablecloths, the carved salt cellar." The smooth efficiency with which Lady Anne reorganises the entire household in minutes demonstrates the managerial skills medieval noblewomen developed. Far from being decorative or helpless, these women commanded complex operations with authority and competence. Up in her chamber, Eleanor stands still as her serving woman laces her into her best gown, the blue one that was meant for next month's feast. Her face is pale, her breathing quick and shallow. "Is my hair acceptable?" she asks, touching the elaborate braided arrangement covered with a gossamer veil. The maid steps back to assess. "Beautiful, my lady. The gold circlet complements your colouring perfectly." Eleanor swallows hard. "They say he was injured in a tournament, that he might be disfigured." The maid makes a dismissive gesture. "Rumours, nothing more. And even if it were true, a scar is nothing compared to good lands and a noble lineage." This practical assessment is jarring to our modern sensibilities. but it reflects medieval priorities. Physical appearance, while not irrelevant, was far less important in marriage negotiations than property, political connections, and family background. For a noblewoman like Eleanor, marriage was her career. The skills she'd been taught since childhood, managing a household, overseeing servants, maintaining appropriate religious observances, producing and raising children, were all in service of this expected role as a wife and eventual mother. "What if he doesn't like me?" Eleanor whispers, so quietly that perhaps she doesn't intend the maid to hear. The serving woman pauses in adjusting Eleanor's veil. "My lady, you are the daughter of a powerful lord with excellent lineage and a substantial dowry. Whether he likes you is secondary." And there's the brutal reality of arranged marriages. Personal preference might develop into consideration over time, but it began as almost irrelevant to the transaction. Marriage was about land, money, and alliances. Emotional compatibility was a lucky bonus, not a requirement. Back at the market, you and your family are preparing to return home. Your father has joined you, bringing news from the fields. "The Lord's new drainage system is working," he tells your mother as they walk ahead of you. "The south field looks better than it has in years." "Good," your mother replies. "Perhaps the harvest will be abundant enough that the winter tax won't leave us hungry this year." These casual words contain a world of anxiety. Bad harvests weren't just inconvenient, they were potentially fatal. A medieval family like yours lived perpetually on the edge of sufficiency, where one bad season could mean genuine hunger. As you pass the church, the priest emerges, deep in conversation with a well-dressed woman you recognize as the merchant's wife from the next town. "The Italian style is much finer," she's saying, gesturing to the illuminated book she holds. "The gold leaf is applied more delicately, and the pigments are brighter." The priest nods. "Indeed, but the cost is prohibitive for our modest parish. Perhaps a local artist could create something similar in the English style." They're discussing a commission for a new religious text, perhaps a psalter or book of hours. These weren't just religious objects, but also status symbols and expressions of piety. Wealthy women often commissioned them, specifying the saints and prayers they wanted included, sometimes even appearing as donors in the illustrations. This merchant's wife represents another category of medieval women we haven't explored yet, the urban middle class that was growing throughout the late medieval period. Neither peasant nor noble, these women often had more practical freedom than either group, running businesses, managing property, and sometimes even joining guilds. "Marjorie bought a new book from that travelling merchant last month," your sister whispers, referring to the merchant's daughter. "It has stories from France and pictures of knights and ladies." "Hush," your mother says automatically. "Books are rare treasures, far beyond the means of a family like yours. The ability to read them is even rarer, though not as rare as we once thought. Recent historical research suggests that perhaps 10% of women in late medieval towns had some degree of literacy, primarily for practical purposes like keeping accounts or reading simple devotional texts. The sun is beginning to sink toward the horizon as you reach home, casting long shadows across the village. Your brother has tended the animals well, and a pot of pottage simmers over the fire, a simple stew of whatever vegetables were available, bulked out with barley or beans. "Did you sell everything?" he asks eagerly as you enter. Your mother nods, showing him the coins. "The blue went first, just as I predicted." There's pride in her voice, justified pride in skilled work well done and properly compensated. Medieval women might have lacked formal power, but they took deep satisfaction in their crafts and contributions to family survival. As evening approaches, thoughts turn toward tomorrow. There's bread to bake, washing to do, endless tasks that structure a medieval woman's existence. Yet within these seemingly rigid confines, women found spaces for agency, for expression, for connection with others. Up at the manor, Lady Eleanor is being presented to Lord William in the Great Hall. She curtsies deeply, eyes modestly downcast as she's been taught. The young nobleman bows in return, studying her with interest. "Lady Eleanor," he says, "your beauty was not exaggerated in the reports I received." A formal compliment, probably rehearsed, but Eleanor's cheeks flush pink nonetheless. She murmurs an appropriate thanks, still not meeting his eyes directly. The adults exchange meaningful glances. The young people are performing their roles correctly. The negotiations can proceed. In the coming days, Eleanor's father and Lord William's father will discuss dowry amounts, land exchanges and marriage dates. Eleanor herself will have little input into these negotiations, though her mother might advocate for favourable terms regarding her future household arrangements or widow's portion. As the formal dinner begins, Lord William turns to Eleanor. "I'm told you play the lute," he says. "Perhaps you would honour us with a performance after the meal." Eleanor nods. "If it would please you, my lord." Music was one of the acceptable accomplishments for noblewomen, along with dancing, embroidery, and knowledge of herbal remedies. These skills weren't just decorative. They served practical purposes in managing a noble household, entertaining guests, creating valuable textiles, and caring for family members' health. As the elegant meal progresses above, your family sits down to your own simpler dinner in the village below. The distance between these two meals, in setting, in food quality, in purpose, illustrates the vast gulf between classes in medieval society. Yet in both locations, women are central to the evening's success. Lady Anne oversees a complex social event with political implications. Your mother provides essential sustenance after a productive day of commerce. Night falls over the village, and stars appear in the clear sky. Another day in medieval life draws to a close, a life that was simultaneously simpler and more complex than our modern existence, with fewer choices but deeper significances, fewer possessions but stronger community bonds. As you prepare for sleep once more on your shared mattress, the church bell tolls Compline, the final prayer of the day. Tomorrow will bring new work, new challenges, new moments of both hardship and beauty. What did medieval women dream of as they drifted to sleep? Perhaps not so different from what we dream of today: security, purpose, connection, some measure of happiness within the constraints of their world. The fire burns down to embers, casting the room in a soft red glow. Outside, an owl calls into the darkness. Sleep comes, bringing temporary peace to women whose waking hours are filled with endless labour. Their lives were harder than ours in countless ways, yet there's something we might envy in their certainty of purpose, their embeddedness in community, their intimate knowledge of the natural world that surrounded them. As you sink deeper into your own comfortable bed, perhaps you'll dream of these medieval women tonight, your sisters across time, so different and yet somehow familiar. Dawn arrives with a gentle nudge from your mother. "Up," she whispers. "The bread needs starting. Today isn't market day, but that doesn't mean rest." For medieval women, every day brought its own specific labours, dictated by the season, the weather, and the endless rhythm of household needs. You dress quickly in the dim light, pulling your kirtle over your linen shift. No need for washing yet. Your weekly bath day is still 3 days away. Instead, You splash water on your face from the bucket near the door, run fingers through your hair, and cover it with a simple linen headcloth. "I've got the fire," your sister mumbles, already stoking last night's embers to life. The heart of any medieval home was its fire, not just for cooking but for warmth, light, and protection against the very real darkness that descended each night. Maintaining it was typically women's work, a constant task of feeding, banking, and reviving flames. Let it go out completely, and you'd have the awkward task of borrowing fire from a neighbour, a small embarrassment that reflected on your household management skills. "The flour is damp at the bottom," you tell your mother, reaching into the storage barrel. Medieval food preservation was an ongoing battle against moisture, insects, and mould. Without airtight containers or refrigeration, keeping food edible required constant vigilance and specialised knowledge. "Mix in some of the drier portion," she replies, already kneading yesterday's starter into a fresh batch of dough. "And add a pinch more salt." Bread was the foundation of medieval diet, the staff of life in a very literal sense. Wealthier families ate fine white bread made from sifted wheat flour. Your family, like most, subsisted on darker breads made from rye or maslin, a wheat and rye mix, often bulked out with beans or peas in lean times. The dough comes together under your mother's experienced hands. She'll let it rise while attending to other morning tasks, then shape it into round loaves for baking in the communal oven later today. "Your father says Goodwife Martha is ailing again," your mother says as she works. "We'll visit her after the baking's done." Goodwife Martha, the elderly widow who lives near the edge of the village. Her husband died 2 winters ago, leaving her dependent on her married son's family and the charity of neighbours. This casual mention reveals something crucial about medieval social structures. Without formal welfare systems, communities cared for their vulnerable members through informal networks of obligation and assistance. Women were central to these networks, bringing food to the sick, helping with childcare during crises, and offering practical support where needed. The bread set aside to rise, your mother turns to the next task, checking yesterday's cheese, now draining in cloth-lined baskets near the window. She presses it gently, nodding with satisfaction at the firmness. Another day of draining, then into the salt, she decides. Cheese-making was another essential female art in medieval households. By transforming milk, which spoiled quickly, into cheese, which could be preserved for months, women extended the utility of a precious resource. The process required precise timing, careful temperature control, and specialized knowledge passed down from mother to daughter across generations. By mid-morning, you've accompanied your mother to the village bakehouse, where the communal oven roars with heat. A group of women wait their turn, using the opportunity to exchange news and advice. "My oldest boy's cough is worse," says one, a basket of shaped dough loaves at her feet. "Nothing seems to ease it." Your mother frowns thoughtfully. "Have you tried a syrup of horehound and honey, or a plaster of mustard seed on his chest at night?" "The horehound, yes, not the mustard. I'll try it tonight." Medical knowledge was another realm where medieval women exercised significant authority. While university-trained physicians, all male, existed in cities, most day-to-day healing happened through women's knowledge of herbal remedies, simple surgical techniques, and practical nursing care. Every village had its wise women who knew which plants eased pain, which poultices drew out infection, which teas induced sleep or calmed digestive troubles. "Old Martin's daughter is brought to bed," announces another woman, lowering her voice. "A difficult birth, they say. The midwife has been there since yesterday." Childbirth was exclusively women's territory in medieval times. Men, even male physicians, were generally excluded from the birthing room, where midwives assisted deliveries based on practical experience and traditional knowledge. While modern medicine has dramatically reduced maternal mortality, medieval women faced significant risks with each pregnancy. They developed rituals, prayers, and medical techniques to improve their chances, supporting each other through what was often the most dangerous event in a woman's life. "God protect her," murmurs your mother, making the sign of the cross. The other women follow suit, a moment of silent solidarity for a neighbour in peril. When the baker calls your turn, your mother slides the loaves into the massive oven with a long-handled wooden peel. The heat blasts her face, reddening her skin and drawing sweat despite the cool morning. Baking was hot, exhausting work, yet another physical demand in lives filled with bodily labour. "An hour until they're done," the baker tells her. "Best come back then." Rather than return home, your mother leads you toward Goodwife Martha's cottage. You stop briefly at your own house to collect a small pot of broth and some of yesterday's bread. "She'll need easy foods if her teeth are troubling her again," your mother explains. Medieval aging brought particular hardships for women. Without modern dentistry, tooth loss was common by middle age. Without eyeglasses, failing vision made fine work increasingly difficult. Without surgical options, ailments like prolapse, common after multiple childbirths, or arthritis became chronic sources of pain and disability. Goodwife Martha's cottage stands slightly apart from others, smaller and more dilapidated than most. As a widow with no independent means, she occupies a precarious social position. Medieval society organized itself around family units headed by men. Women without male protection, whether widows, spinsters, or the abandoned, were particularly vulnerable. You knock at the low wooden door. "Goodwife Martha?" "It's Agnes from the mill house with my daughter." A faint voice calls you in. The interior is dim, the fire burning low. The old woman sits wrapped in blankets despite the mild day, her thin frame lost in their folds. "Bless you for coming," she says, her voice wavering. "These old bones feel the damp something terrible." Your mother moves immediately to the fire, building it up with practiced efficiency. You set out the food on the small table, noting the empty water bucket in the corner. "I'll fetch water," you offer, taking the bucket outside to the nearby stream. This small act of charity reflects medieval Christianity's emphasis on corporal works of mercy, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, clothing the naked, sheltering the homeless, visiting the sick. For women especially, these practical acts of compassion were considered essential expressions of faith, more important than theological arguments or abstract beliefs. When you return with the water, your mother has Goodwife Martha's gnarled foot in her lap, examining an angry sore on the heel. "It doesn't heal," the old woman complains. "Been there since Michaelmas last." "Let me make a poultice," your mother says. From her belt pouch she produces a small packet of dried herbs and a tiny pot of honey. "Have you clean rags we can use for binding?" The next hour passes in practical nursing care. Your mother cleans the wound, applies her herbal preparation, and wraps it carefully. She helps the old woman move to a more comfortable position, combs and rebraids her thin white hair, and ensures she eats a few spoonfuls of broth. This scene, one woman tending another's bodily needs without fuss or ceremony, represents a deeply medieval approach to both medical care and spiritual obligation. Bodies weren't private territories in the way we consider them today. Helping someone wash, dress, Use a chamber pot or treat intimate ailments was considered normal and necessary. Will you tell her about Lady Eleanor's betrothal, you ask as your mother works, eager to share the exciting news from market day. Lady Eleanor's betrothal, is it? Goodwife Martha perks up, interest sparking in her rheumy eyes. To whom? Lord William of Harwood, you inform her importantly. He came to the manor yesterday with 6 mounted men and a pack of hunting dogs. The old woman nods. A good match, if it goes forward. His lands border the North Fields. I remember when his father married. I was a girl then, serving at the manor house. She chuckles at some private memory. That one had an eye for the serving maids, he did. Caused no end of trouble. And here we glimpse another reality of medieval life, the sexual vulnerability of lower status women. Female servants working in noble households frequently faced unwanted advances from male family members or guests. With little practical recourse and few alternative employment options, many endured harassment or yielded to pressure. Those who became pregnant often lost their positions and reputations simultaneously. Is Lady Eleanor pleased with the match? Goodwife Martha asks. Your mother shrugs. Who can know a noble lady's mind? But she'll have security and status, which count for more than girlish feelings. This practical assessment reflects medieval marriage priorities across all classes. While romantic love wasn't unknown or unvalued, it was considered an uncertain foundation for marriage compared to economic stability, family alliances, and social appropriateness. The church bells ring noon, signalling the day's midpoint and time for the main meal. You need to return to the bakehouse or your bread, then home for dinner with your family. We'll come again tomorrow, your mother promises as you prepare to leave. The bread should last you until then, and there's cheese wrapped in the cloth. Goodwife Martha clasps your mother's hand. God reward you for your kindness. I have nothing to give in return. Your prayers are payment enough, your mother answers, the standard response to such thanks. In medieval thinking, the prayers of the poor held special value, creating a kind of spiritual economy alongside the material one. By helping the needy, you not only fulfilled Christian obligations but potentially secured powerful intercessors before God. The walk home takes you past the church, where a group of men have gathered for some parish business. They nod respectfully to your mother but don't include her in their discussion. While medieval women participated actively in economic and social life, formal governance, whether of the village, guild or church, remained largely male territory, with notable exceptions. One of those exceptions might be seen in the churchyard, where an older woman directs a small group of girls in weeding around the gravestones. She's the parish starch wife, responsible for maintaining church linens and teaching young girls basic religious knowledge and household skills. This semi-official role gave certain women recognized authority within strictly defined boundaries. Your fresh bread safely retrieved from the bakehouse, you return home for the midday meal. The house is empty, your father and brother still in the fields, your sister sent to gather wild greens for the pot. Wash these turnips, your mother instructs, handing you 3 small gnarled roots. Medieval vegetables bore little resemblance to their modern supermarket descendants, being smaller, tougher, and less predictably shaped. What they lacked in appearance, however, they made up for in intense flavour and nutritional density. The simple meal comes together quickly. Turnips and greens in broth, bread, and a small piece of cheese for each family member. You set portions aside for your father and brother, who will eat in the fields rather than walking home midday. Take it to them, your mother says, then stop at the stream on your way back. The linen needs washing. And so another female task fills your afternoon, laundering the family's few garments and household cloths. Unlike modern washing, this isn't a matter of tossing items in a machine with detergent. Medieval laundry required hauling water, scrubbing with lye soap, itself made by women in a dangerous process involving wood ash and animal fat, beating fabrics against rocks, rinsing repeatedly, and hanging to dry, all while keeping a watchful eye for approaching men, since laundry often necessitated hitching up skirts to avoid soaking them. At the stream, you find you're not alone. 3 other women work nearby, their chatter and laughter making the task more pleasant. One, heavily pregnant, rests frequently on a fallen log. "Not much longer now," she tells the others, rubbing her distended belly. The midwife says before the next full moon. "Your third, isn't it?" asks another woman. "Easier than the first, God willing." The pregnant woman nods. "Nothing could be harder than that first one. 3 days I laboured. Thought I'd die for certain." This casual conversation about potentially fatal childbirth illustrates medieval women's matter-of-fact relationship with mortality. Death was a constant presence in their lives, in childbed, from disease, from accident or violence. Rather than pretending it didn't exist, as we often do, they acknowledged its reality while seeking practical and spiritual protections. The laundry finished, you wring out the heavy wet cloth until your hands ache, then bundle it into your carrying basket for the walk home. The pregnant woman struggles to lift her own basket. "Here," you offer, helping position it against her hip. "Lean it on the side, not the front." She smiles gratefully. "My husband says I should leave the washing to my sister until after the birth, but she has enough with her own 5 children to tend." "Men don't understand how the work multiplies," says another woman with a knowing look. "Everything must be done, baby or no baby." This exchange highlights a fundamental truth about medieval gender divisions. While men's work was often seasonal or could be postponed in emergencies, women's tasks were relentless and immediate. Bread must be baked, children fed, animals milked, food preserved, water carried, regardless of a woman's physical condition or competing demands. The afternoon wears on. You help your mother hang the washing on bushes to dry, then turn to food preparation for the evening meal. Your sister returns with a basket of wild greens, dandelion, sorrel, lamb's quarters, and begins cleaning them by the doorway. "I saw a fox near the south meadow," she reports, "a red one with white on his tail." This casual wildlife observation reminds us of medieval people's intimate knowledge of the natural world. Without electronic entertainment or indoor hobbies, they spent countless hours outdoors, developing detailed awareness of plants, animals, weather patterns, and seasonal changes. Women especially, gathering wild foods and medicines, became expert naturalists by necessity. As the day begins its slow descent toward evening, your father and brother return from the fields tired and dirt-streaked. They bring news of their own, a dispute between 2 neighbouring villages over grazing rights, a promising stand of flax nearly ready for harvest. Your mother listens attentively while continuing her work. These agricultural updates aren't merely interesting, they're vital intelligence that helps her plan household activities. If flax will be harvested soon, she needs to prepare for the intensive labour of processing it into linen. If village tensions are rising, she might postpone visits to certain areas. Medieval women's work required not just physical strength and skill, but strategic thinking, careful resource management, and social intelligence. Far from being mindless drudgery, though physically demanding, their labour demanded complex decision-making and specialised knowledge. The evening meal, the day's main sustenance, consists of a pottage of grains, vegetables, and a small amount of salt pork for flavour. Your father says grace, thanking God for the food before you. Despite constant labour, medieval people experienced frequent food insecurity, making gratitude for sufficient nourishment both sincere and necessary. As darkness approaches, the family settles around the central fire. Work continues even now. Your mother spins wool into thread using a drop spindle. Your sister mends a torn sleeve. Your brother whittles a new handle for a broken tool. Only the smallest chores can be accomplished by firelight, however, making winter evenings particularly challenging with their extended darkness. "Tell us a story, father," your youngest brother pleads. Your father considers, then begins a familiar tale about a clever peasant who outwits a greedy lord. Folk tales served multiple purposes in medieval culture. Entertainment, certainly, but also transmission of values, subtle social critique, and reinforcement of community identity. Without books or formal education, these oral traditions preserved cultural knowledge across generations. You notice your mother listening while she works, occasionally smiling at a humorous turn in the story. Medieval women's lives weren't unrelieved misery. They found joy in social connections, pride in skilled work, comfort in religious certainty, and pleasure in simple entertainments. As your father's story concludes, the church bells toll Compline, the day's final prayer office. Your mother sets aside her spinning and leads the family in evening prayers, another way women maintained religious observance within the household. Our Father, who art in heaven. The familiar words provide structure and certainty in an uncertain world. Medieval Catholicism wasn't just about grand cathedrals and elaborate rituals. It existed in these everyday moments of devotion, woven intimately into domestic life. Bedtime approaches once more. The fire is banked to preserve coals for morning, water is drawn for tomorrow, and the door is securely barred against nocturnal dangers both natural and supernatural. Medieval nights were truly dark, filled with real and imagined threats from wild animals, human intruders, and malevolent spirits. As you settle onto the shared sleeping pallet, your body aches from the day's labour. Medieval women's work was physically demanding in ways modern people can barely comprehend. Constant lifting, carrying, scrubbing, and stooping without ergonomic tools or labour-saving devices. By age 30, many showed wear equivalent to a modern 60-year-old, with arthritic joints, stooped postures, and bodies marked by countless injuries and repetitive strain. Yet there's satisfaction, too, in tasks completed and obligations fulfilled. You've helped feed your family, aided a vulnerable neighbour, maintained crucial household systems. Within the constraints of your world, you've exercised agency and skill. Your sister's breathing deepens beside you as sleep claims her. Your mother murmurs a final prayer before settling herself. Outside, an owl calls. 3 times, a good omen according to village wisdom. Medieval women's lives were circumscribed by gender, class, and religious expectations, yet within these boundaries they created meaning, maintained communities, preserved knowledge, and shaped culture. Their strength wasn't in dramatic gestures or public recognition, but in the patient, skilled labour that sustained human existence day after day, generation after generation. As sleep approaches, you wonder again about Lady Eleanor in her manor house bedroom. Is she awake too, contemplating her likely marriage? Are her concerns so different from those that might eventually face you? The transition to a new household, the expectations of producing children, the challenge of managing resources wisely. The distance between noble and common women was vast in material terms, but perhaps narrower in certain fundamental experiences. All navigated societies that limited their formal power while depending on their essential labour. All balanced complex social expectations with personal desires. All faced the physical vulnerabilities unique to female bodies in a pre-modern world. The last ember in the fire pops softly. Tomorrow will bring another day of work, prayer and community engagement. The eternal rhythm of medieval womanhood. As you drift towards sleep, wrapped in the familiar sounds of your family's breathing, there's comfort in this predictable pattern, this known place in the world. Unlike your comfortable modern bed with its privacy and personal space, this medieval sleeping arrangement binds you physically to your family members, a tangible reminder of the interdependence that characterized pre-modern life. You're never truly alone, for better and worse, but always embedded in networks of obligation, support, and shared identity. Sleep comes at last, bringing dreams that medieval and modern minds alike share, of security, connection, occasional transcendence, and the mysterious landscapes of the unconscious that know no historical boundaries. Something unusual happens the next morning. Before the household is even fully awake, a knock sounds at the door. A message from the manor, announces a boy of about 12, the steward's son. He holds out a small folded parchment, sealed with a blob of wax. Your father takes it with visible confusion. Written messages are rare in village life, where most communication happens face to face. He breaks the seal and stares at the contents. "What is it?" your mother asks, coming to peer over his shoulder. Unlike many peasant women, she can read a little, just enough to make out prices at market and follow the simplest prayers in a book. "Lady Anne requires Agnes's blue cloth," your father says slowly, "for a special commission. We're to come to the manor today with samples." Your mother's hand flies to her mouth. "My cloth? For the manor?" This unexpected summons represents a rare opportunity. Direct dealings with the manor household could mean better prices, ongoing commissions, and elevated status within the village. But it also brings risks. Disappointing noble patrons could have consequences beyond a simple lost sale. "We must go immediately," your mother decides, already reaching for her good head covering. "No, wait. First, I need to fetch the remaining blue cloth from the storage chest." The next hour is a flurry of activity. Your mother carefully inspects every inch of her remaining blue-dyed fabric, rejecting pieces with even minor flaws. She wraps the chosen lengths in clean linen and places them in her best carrying basket, lined with dried lavender to impart a pleasant scent. "You'll come with me," she tells you. "Put on your Sunday kirtle." This is unexpected. Manor visits are significant events, not casual errands. That your mother wants you along suggests she's thinking of the future, perhaps hoping to introduce you to potential connections or demonstrate your own weaving skills. The walk to the manor takes you up the gentle hill that separates the village from the lord's residence. Though it's only a mile distant, the manor occupies a different world, one of stone buildings, glass windows, and iron-bound doors. Guards at the gate eye your approach with professional disinterest. "Agnes the Weaver," your mother announces with quiet dignity, "summoned by Lady Anne." A servant is called to escort you through the outer courtyard, past the stables and kitchens, toward a side entrance used by tradespeople and delivery carts. The manor complex is larger than you realized, a self-contained community of specialized workers, cooks, grooms, laundresses, pages, and dozens more, all serving the noble family's needs. You're led not to the great hall but to a sunny chamber on the second floor, the lady's solar, where she conducts household business away from the public areas below. The room contains several women, some sewing by the windows, others sorting through fabrics spread across a large table. Lady Anne rises from her seat as you enter. Up close, she's less intimidating than she appeared in church. A woman in her 30s with lines of care around her eyes and practical hands that, though adorned with rings, show signs of regular work. "You're the weaver?" she asks your mother. "Yes, my lady." Your mother curtsies deeply, a gesture you hastily copy. "I've brought samples of the blue wool as requested." Lady Anne gestures impatiently. "Show me." With careful movements, your mother unwraps her cloth. The blue catches the light from the tall windows, revealing its rich, even colour. It's her finest work, representing countless hours of labour from sheep shearing through spinning, weaving, and dyeing. "The colour is good," Lady Anne says after examining it closely. "Better than I expected. How much do you have in total?" 15 ells, my lady, of this quality, another 10 of slightly lighter shade." Lady Anne turns to an older woman nearby, her chamberlain, who manages household expenses. "We'll take it all, for Eleanor's attendance at the betrothal ceremony. Their gowns must complement her blue without matching exactly." Just like that, your mother's entire stock of blue cloth is sold in a single transaction. It represents months of work, but also a substantial sum. More than your family might otherwise earn in half a year. "Can you produce more by Michaelmas?" Lady Anne continues. "We'll need additional pieces for household linens in the same shade." Your mother hesitates only briefly. "Yes, my lady, though the woad is costly and must be purchased in town." "Margaret will advance you payment for materials," Lady Anne says, nodding toward her chamberlain. "Half now, half on delivery." This arrangement, payment in advance for materials, is unusual and advantageous. It means your mother can work without the financial risk of investing her own limited resources in expensive dyestuffs. It's a mark of trust from the lady of the manor, recognition of your mother's skill and reliability. As Margaret calculates the payment, Lady Anne's attention shifts to you. "Your daughter?" she asks. "Yes, my lady," your mother answers. "She helps with the weaving and dyeing." "She has your hands," Lady Anne observes. "Good weaver's hands." This seemingly casual comment carries significant weight. In a world where children generally followed their parents' occupations, Lady Anne is essentially acknowledging your probable future as a skilled textile worker. It's both a compliment and an assumption about your predetermined path. The business concluded, you're given a small cup of watered wine, a courtesy to valued artisans, before being escorted back to the courtyard. Your mother clutches her payment securely, her face struggling to contain her excitement until you're beyond the manor gates. "Did you see?" she whispers once you're on the village path. "Lady Anne herself, and advance payment for materials." This unexpected windfall transforms your family's immediate prospects. The money will purchase not just dye-stuffs, but perhaps a new tool or two, a winter cloak for your growing brother, a small luxury like honey or almonds for special occasions. More importantly, it establishes a relationship with the manor household that could provide ongoing work and income. But your mother's good fortune carries deeper significance beyond the financial boost. It demonstrates how medieval women, despite formal restrictions, carved out economic spaces through specialized skills and reliable craftsmanship. Unable to join many formal guilds or own property independently, they nonetheless built businesses through reputation, quality work, and strategic connections. We must go to town, your mother decides as you approach home. Tomorrow at first light. The market there will have the woad we need, and better quality than the travelling merchants bring to the village. The town. The prospect sends a thrill through you. Located some 10 miles distant, the town represents an expanded world of opportunities, goods and experiences rarely available in village life. You've been there only twice before, once for a major religious festival, once when accompanying your father to sell grain. That night, preparations consume the household. Your father agrees to manage home responsibilities during your absence, recognizing the importance of fulfilling Lady Anne's commission promptly. Your mother plans the journey meticulously, which roads to take, where to stay overnight, which merchants to approach first. Agnes at the Crossroads Inn will let us sleep in her kitchen, she tells you. It will cost us a halfpenny, but safer than trying to return in one day. This careful planning reflects medieval travel realities. Roads were often poor, subject to weather damage, and potentially dangerous. Women travelling without male protection were particularly vulnerable, making arrangements with trusted contacts essential. Morning arrives with the light misting rain, not heavy enough to prevent travel but sufficient to dampen clothing and spirits. You and your mother set out just as dawn breaks, heavy cloaks wrapped around your shoulders, sturdy wooden staffs in hand to help navigate muddy patches. The journey proceeds without incident, though your feet ache and your shoulders strain from carrying bundles by the time the town walls appear in mid-afternoon. Unlike your small village, this town boasts stone fortifications, multiple church spires, and a proper gatehouse where officials check incoming travellers and goods. Purpose? Asks the bored-looking guard. Purchasing dye-stuffs, your mother replies. Staying one night with Agnes at the Crossroads Inn. The guard nods, barely interested. You pay the small entry fee and pass through into a world that seems chaotically alive after village quietude. The narrow streets bustle with activity, apprentices running errands, merchants calling their wares, animals being driven to slaughter, women carrying water or laundry, children dart in between legs on mysterious missions of their own. And the smell, a complex mixture of humanity, animals, food, smoke, tanning chemicals, brewery fermentation, and dozens of other urban odours both pleasant and foul. Medieval towns lacked effective sanitation, making them aromatic experiences that assaulted newcomers' senses. Stay close, your mother warns, navigating confidently toward the central marketplace. Though small by modern standards, this market hosts dozens of specialised vendors arranged by trade. Butchers in one section, fishmongers in another, cloth merchants, spice sellers, and coopers all clustered with their guild colleagues. The dyer's quarter announces itself first by smell, the pungent odours of fermenting woad, mordants, and fixing agents, then by sight, as fabric hanging to dry creates a colourful canopy across the narrow street. Here, urban medieval women found one of their most reliable trades. While men dominated many aspects of cloth production, dyeing remained accessible to women who mastered its chemical mysteries. Your mother approaches a workshop where a middle-aged woman supervises two younger assistants, stirring enormous vats of blue liquid. This is Mistress Edith, a master dyer whose business has supported her since her husband's death 15 years earlier. Agnes from Millbrook, your mother greets her. We met at St. Giles's Fair last summer. Mistress Edith squints, then nods with recognition. The weaver with the even blue. I remember. What brings you to town? A commission from Lady Anne herself, your mother explains, pride evident despite her attempt at casualness. I need quality woad, more than the village merchants carry. This exchange between skilled craftswomen reveals the complex economic networks that connected rural and urban production. Village artisans like your mother created basic goods, but often relied on town specialists for materials, while town businesses benefited from the wider distribution rural customers provided. Mistress Edith invites you inside her workshop, a rare privilege that acknowledges your mother's professional status rather than treating her as a simple customer. Inside, the technical complexity of medieval dyeing becomes apparent. Different mordants, fixing agents like alum, iron, or copper create varied shades from the same dye stuff. Temperature control affects color intensity. Timing determines whether fabric emerges vibrant or muted. My youngest daughter learned to read last year, Mistress Edith mentions as she shows your mother her finest woad cakes. The guildmaster's wife teaches girls for a small fee. She has your daughter's quick look. This casual comment highlights an important urban advantage: greater educational opportunities for girls, particularly in trade families. While village education remained minimal and practical, town girls might learn basic literacy, numeracy, or specialized skills from women who had themselves acquired such knowledge. Your mother glances at you thoughtfully, perhaps considering possibilities she hadn't previously imagined. In medieval society, geographic mobility often enabled social mobility, with town opportunities expanding horizons beyond village limitations. The business with Mistress Edith concluded. Your mother leads you through other market areas, purchasing smaller items needed at home: needles, thread, a pottery cup to replace one broken last month. Each transaction demonstrates her careful resource management, balancing quality against cost, immediate needs against future wants. As afternoon fades toward evening, you make your way to the Crossroads Inn, where Agnes, a distant cousin, greets you warmly. Unlike the village tavern, this establishment serves multiple functions: lodging for travellers, meeting place for local guilds, dining hall for townspeople without cooking facilities. You've come at an interesting time, Agnes tells you, showing you where to store your purchases safely. The Weavers' Guild meets tonight. There's been trouble. Trouble? Your mother inquires. Agnes lowers her voice. The guild has proposed new rules. No woman may weave fine cloth for sale unless she's a master's widow or daughter, working under male supervision. They say it's about quality control, but really it's about pushing independent women out of the better markets. This conflict exemplifies growing late medieval tensions around women's economic roles. As craft production became more organized and profitable, male-dominated guilds increasingly restricted female participation, pushing women toward lower-paid, less prestigious work despite their often identical skills. Will the women fight it? Your mother asks. Agnes smiles grimly. Mistress Jones certainly will. You remember her? The widow who took over her husband's workshop. She has 3 apprentices now, all women, and her cloth sells to merchants from London itself. After a simple supper of pottage and bread, you follow your mother to the inn's main room, where the Weavers' Guild meeting is about to begin. Though you can't participate, observing offers rare insight into urban economic governance. The room fills with weavers, mostly men, but with a significant minority of women, primarily widows who inherited workshop rights. The master of the guild, a corpulent man with fingers stained by decades of dye work, calls the meeting to order. The proposal before us concerns standards of production, he announces. To maintain our reputation for quality, fine cloth weaving should be limited to those with proper training and oversight. A murmur runs through the assembled crowd. Then a woman rises, tall, grey-haired, dressed in simple but fine clothing. This must be Mistress Joan. Proper training and oversight, she repeats, her voice clear and confident. I've been weaving for 35 years, 20 under my husband's name and 15 under my own. My cloth sells at premium prices because of its quality, not because of any man's oversight. The room divides visibly, with most men nodding approval of the proposal, while women exchange glances of concern or determination. What follows is a passionate debate about skill versus gender, tradition versus innovation, protection versus restriction. Watching from your corner, you witness how medieval women navigated male-dominated power structures, sometimes conforming, sometimes resisting, often finding creative compromises or alternative pathways. Mistress Joan doesn't challenge the guild's authority directly, but instead argues that excluding skilled women harms the very quality standards the guild claims to protect. The debate remains unresolved when the meeting adjourns for the night. As the room empties, your mother approaches Mistress Joan, introducing herself and explaining her commission from Lady Anne. Good for you, the older woman says approvingly. Manor work pays well if you maintain quality. They tried to prevent me from selling to noble households directly, said it should go through guild-approved merchants. I told them I'd take my business to the next town if they persisted. This brief exchange reveals how exceptional women created leverage through skill and reputation. While most female artisans operated at the margins of formal economic structures, those with unusual talent or strategic connections could sometimes transcend typical limitations. Back in the inn's kitchen, preparing for sleep on pallets near the hearth, you ask your mother, "Could I ever be like Mistress Joan? Have my own workshop?" Your mother doesn't immediately dismiss the idea, which itself represents changing medieval attitudes. "It would be difficult," she says honestly. "Town life requires money for guild fees, for rent, for materials, and women face obstacles men don't." She's silent for a moment, then adds, "But not impossible, especially for a girl who learns her craft well, who saves carefully, who builds good reputation. The world is changing, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse." This cautious optimism reflects late medieval economic realities. While formal restrictions on women often increased during this period as commerce became more regulated, growing trade networks and urban development simultaneously created new niches women could occupy, as specialized producers, retailers, or service providers. The following morning brings another aspect of town life: religious diversity. In the village, everyone attends the same church, follows identical observances, shares uniform beliefs. The town, however, hosts multiple parishes, religious orders, and even a small community of beguines, women who live communally, following religious devotions without taking formal nuns' vows. Your mother takes you past the beguinage on your way to morning mass. Behind modest walls, these women live independently of both family control and full church authority, supporting themselves through textile work, teaching, and care for the sick. It represents another alternative path for medieval women, one that provided community, purpose, and relative autonomy. "Some girls from our village have joined them," your mother comments. "Second or third daughters with no inheritance prospects mostly. They say the life is hard but dignified." The beguines illustrate medieval women's resourcefulness in creating spaces that balanced religious devotion with practical independence. While male church authorities viewed them with suspicion precisely because they operated outside traditional control systems, these communities persisted through their economic, self-sufficiency, and valued social contributions. After Mass, the business of purchasing dyestuffs continues. By midday, your mother has acquired everything needed for Lady Anne's commission: high-quality woad, alum for mordant, other specialized ingredients for achieving the precise shade required. The investment is substantial but secured by the advance payment. Before leaving town, you make one final stop at a small shop near the eastern gate. Unlike the open-air market stalls, this establishment has a proper door, a counter, and shelves displaying mysterious ingredients in labelled containers. It belongs to Mistress Clara, an apothecary who supplies medicines, cosmetics, and household chemicals. Mistress Clara represents yet another female economic niche. While university-trained physicians, exclusively male, treated wealthy patients, practical medicine remained substantially in women's hands through midwifery, nursing, and herbalism. Apothecaries occupied a middle ground, not formally educated like physicians but more specialized than village healers, and this liminal space allowed some women to establish recognized expertise. "Agnes, good to see you," Mistress Clara greets your mother. "The usual remedies?" Your mother nods. "The willow bark tincture for my husband's winter aches, and something for the children's coughs when cold weather comes." "And perhaps something for yourself," Mistress Clara suggests with a knowing smile. "The rose water and honey cream for hands. You can't weave properly with cracked fingers." This small luxury, a soothing cream for work-damaged hands, represents more than simple vanity. For craftswomen, maintaining the physical tools of their trade, including their own bodies, constituted a professional necessity rather than an indulgence. Your mother hesitates, mentally calculating against her purse, then nods. "A small pot. The manor commission requires fine work." As Mistress Clara prepares the purchases, you notice a girl about your age carefully grinding something at a table behind the counter. The apothecary follows your gaze. "My apprentice," she explains. "My brother's daughter from the country. She has a good memory for ingredients and steady hands for measuring." This casual mention highlights another economic path for medieval girls: apprenticeship to a female relative practicing specialized trades. While formal guild apprenticeships remained largely closed to girls, informal training through family connections offered alternative skill development. Purchases complete, you begin the journey home, your bundles heavier, but spirits lighter with successful mission accomplishment. The town recedes behind you, returning you to the familiar rhythms of village life, yet perhaps with expanded awareness of possibilities beyond your immediate horizon. That night, back in your own home, the family gathers to examine your mother's purchases and hear accounts of town experiences. Your father listens with interest to the guild debate, recognizing its potential implications for your mother's weaving business. Your siblings marvel at town descriptions, the colourful workshops, the variety of people and goods. "Tomorrow we begin dyeing the new cloth," your mother announces. "Lady Anne's commission takes priority over everything else." As you settle onto your familiar sleeping pallet, the contrast between town and village life echo in your mind. Urban women often enjoyed greater economic opportunities, wider social networks, and more educational possibilities than their rural counterparts. Yet they also faced increased regulation, higher living costs, and more complex social hierarchies. Medieval women's lives were never uniformly restricted or uniformly empowered. Their experiences varied dramatically by location, class, marital status, individual skills, and historical moment. What remained consistent was their essential economic contribution, whether acknowledged or undervalued, and their creative adaptation to systems designed primarily by and for men. Sleep comes easily after the exhaustion of travel. Your dreams might mix village familiarity with glimpses of wider possibilities. Not modern freedom, certainly, but perhaps expanded horizons within medieval constraints. Tomorrow brings the familiar work of dyeing, yet with new purpose as you help create cloth destined for a noble household during a significant ceremonial occasion. Your medieval reality continues, bound by gender, class, and historical context, yet never completely without agency or opportunity within those very real limitations. The weeks following your town journey take on a new rhythm. Lady Anne's commission dominates household activities, transforming your mother from a village weaver into something approaching a specialty craftswoman. Your days fill with dyeing, a complex process that begins well before dawn and extends into evening. First, preparing the woad, crushing the dried leaves, fermenting them in urine collected from every family member in special pots, then adding wood ash to create the precise alkaline balance needed for true blue. Not so much ash, your mother cautions, as you sprinkle the grey powder into the fermenting mixture. Too alkaline and the colour dulls. We need the bright blue Lady Anne admired. The vats require constant attention, checking temperature, adjusting ingredients, maintaining the delicate chemical reactions that transform plant matter into vibrant dye. Your hands stain deep blue, a craftsperson's mark that no amount of scrubbing will completely remove. Now we see why blue cloth costs more than brown or green, your father comments, wrinkling his nose at the distinctive smell that permeates the house. Dyeing isn't simply women's work in medieval households. Men often handle certain aspects, especially in town workshops where the heavier labour of managing large vats falls to male workers. But in your family, necessity makes this primarily female territory, with knowledge passing from mother to daughter. By the third day of dyeing, news of your mother's manor commission has spread throughout the village. Goodwife Ellen stops by, ostensibly to borrow a cooking pot, but clearly curious about the prestigious work. They say Lady Eleanor's betrothal will be a grand affair, she mentions casually. Guests from 3 counties and musicians from London itself. Your mother smiles but shares no confidences. Professional discretion is essential when working for noble households. Gossiping about their affairs could jeopardize future commissions. The blue is coming along well, she says instead, redirecting the conversation to safer territory. After Ellen departs, your mother shakes her head. She'll be telling everyone the pot is for our special dyeing work, not her cooking. By sundown, the whole village will know exactly how much woad we purchased in town. This observation highlights medieval social dynamics. In small communities where privacy barely existed, information represented both currency and power. Women's networks spread news, established reputations, and influenced collective opinions, for better and worse. While your mother works on the manor commission, other aspects of life continue. The harvest approaches, bringing increased labour for everyone, including women. Your older brother mentions seeing preparations in the fields during his daily work. They're sharpening the scythes already, he reports over a simple dinner of bread and pottage. Reeve says we start the barley field next week if weather holds. Harvest time transformed medieval gender divisions of labour. While women's work always included agricultural components, during this crucial period the entire community mobilised, with women working alongside men in the fields out of absolute necessity. The successful gathering of crops determined winter survival for the whole village. We'll need to arrange our dyeing around the harvest, your mother says, frowning slightly. The manor cloth must be completed, but we can't neglect our field duties. This balancing of obligations illustrates the complex demands on medieval women's time and energy. Unlike specialized urban craftswomen, rural women maintained multiple economic roles simultaneously: household managers, textile producers, agricultural labourers, child caregivers, shifting priority among them as seasons and circumstances demanded. The next day brings unexpected excitement. A group of travellers arrives in the village, merchants, pilgrims, and a troupe of travelling performers making their way toward the town you recently visited. Such visitors are relatively rare events, bringing news, goods, and entertainment from the wider world. After completing essential morning tasks, your mother allows you and your sister to watch the performers in the village centre. Other women and children gather as, well, creating an impromptu audience while most men continue fieldwork. The performers include musicians, a juggler, and a storyteller. They offer a modified version of their usual repertoire, appropriate for a village audience rather than the more sophisticated town or noble audiences they typically entertain. Still, their skills impress, particularly the musician who plays 3 instruments in succession. "They say she was trained in a convent," whispers a woman nearby, nodding toward the female musician. "Learned music with the nuns before deciding against taking vows." This casual comment highlights another medieval path for women with special talents. Convents provided rare formal education, including musical training, literacy, and sometimes even classical learning. Though religious life imposed significant restrictions, it also offered intellectual and artistic opportunities largely unavailable elsewhere to women. The performances conclude with hat passing for coins and a brief market where the travellers sell small items collected during their journeys: ribbons, pins, simple jewellery, foreign spices in tiny amounts. Your mother purchases a length of bright red ribbon, tucking it away for Christmas, with a meaningful glance at your younger sister. As the travellers prepare to continue their journey, you notice one young woman among them receiving particular attention from village boys. She's perhaps 18, with copper-coloured hair visible beneath her head covering and a confident manner as she packs away the group's belongings. "Stop staring," your mother murmurs, noticing your interest. Travelling players live differently than respectable village girls. This gentle rebuke carries layers of meaning about medieval attitudes toward women's sexuality and reputation. Female performers walked a precarious social line. Their mobility and public visibility contradicted core expectations of female modesty and family oversight. While their talents earned admiration, their lifestyle often prompted suspicion or moral judgment. Back home, the dyeing work continues, but conversation keeps returning to the visitors. Even your father, returning from the fields, asks questions about the performers and merchants. Did they bring news from the north? He wants to know. There were rumours of cattle disease spreading from Yorkshire. Without newspapers, radio, or internet, medieval information networks relied on travellers who physically carried news between communities. A visiting merchant might bring the first word of political changes, natural disasters, or economic conditions that could directly impact local lives. The unexpected holiday atmosphere created by the traveller's brief visit continues into evening, when your father surprises everyone by suggesting a walk to the village alehouse after supper. Though primarily a male space, medieval alehouses occasionally welcomed women, particularly for special occasions or when accompanied by male family members. "We've earned some celebration," he says, glancing at the nearly complete dyed cloth drying on frames behind the house. "Your mother's work will bring good payment from the manor." The alehouse occupies a slightly larger cottage at the village edge, distinguished by the ale stake, a pole with a bush tied to it, projecting from its roof, the universal medieval sign for drinks available. Inside, tallow candles provide dim light and benches line the walls. The earthen floor has been scattered with fresh rushes mixed with herbs to combat inevitable spills and odours. Your father finds seats near the door, a respectable position for a family group, neither seeking central attention nor hiding shamefully in corners. He purchases ale for himself and your mother, cider for you and your siblings. The drinks arrive in wooden cups that have seen years of service, the ale cloudy but fragrant with the herbs used to preserve and flavour it. Several village men already occupy the room, along with 3 of the travelling merchants who will spend the night here before continuing their journey tomorrow. In one corner, 2 local men play a dice game, their good-natured arguments drawing laughs from onlookers. This scene represents typical medieval entertainment, simple, communal, and largely self-created rather than passively consumed. Without electronic diversions, people entertain themselves through conversation, music, games, and storytelling, with alcohol often, though not always, playing a central role in social lubrication. As your family sips their drinks, the door opens to admit a group of young men returning from fieldwork. Among them is Thomas, the miller's son, whose glance lingers on your sister a moment longer than casual greeting requires. Though only 16, she blushes visibly, suddenly finding her cider cup fascinating. Your mother notices this silent exchange, her expression thoughtful rather than disapproving. Thomas comes from a respectable family with a stable economic position in village hierarchy. His father controls the crucial mill where all local grain must be processed, a lucrative monopoly granted by the Lord. This wordless interaction offers a glimpse into medieval courtship realities. For common people, marriage was primarily an economic partnership, but personal attraction wasn't irrelevant. Parents sought advantageous matches that would improve their children's material circumstances, while still considering basic compatibility and, when possible, inclination. Unlike noble marriages negotiated by male heads of households as formal contracts, common people's marriages often involved more female influence in the selection process. Mothers, especially, played crucial roles in identifying suitable matches, making discreet inquiries about potential partners' characters, health, and family circumstances. One of the travelling merchants begins telling a tale about a wealthy merchant's daughter, who disguised herself as a boy to escape an unwanted marriage. The story, clearly fictional but entertaining, sparks conversation about real marriage customs in different regions. In my grandmother's village, offers a woman nearby, they still practice bride capture. The groom and his friends pretend to steal the bride, even though everything's arranged beforehand. Near London, they test a bride's housekeeping before finalising the match, counters one of the merchants. She must prove she can brew good ale and manage accounts. These varying customs highlight medieval marriage's regional diversity. While church doctrine technically required mutual consent for valid marriages, practical implementations varied widely across Europe. Some areas maintained older traditions emphasizing family arrangements, while others allowed considerable courtship freedom within certain boundaries. For women especially, marriage represented the most significant life transition, determining their economic circumstances, geographic location, daily activities, and social position. While modern romanticised views of medieval courtship imagine knights pining for ladies, most women's experiences centred on practical compatibility with men of similar social standing. As the evening progresses, more villagers arrive, drawn by rumours that one of the travellers plays particularly fine music. The atmosphere grows livelier, with several people clearing space for dancing when the musician produces a small pipe and tabor, drum. Your mother leans close to your ear. "Notice how the older women watch everyone from the corners," she says quietly. "They see who dances with whom, who speaks too freely after ale, who leaves with whom. By tomorrow, they'll have revised their mental records of everyone's reputation." This observation highlights medieval social control mechanisms. In communities without formal police or extensive written laws, collective oversight maintained behavioral standards. Women often served as informal enforcers of social norms, particularly regarding sexual behavior and marital prospects. When Thomas approaches your sister for a dance, your mother gives a nearly imperceptible nod of permission. The interaction will occur in full public view, properly chaperoned by family and community, allowing young people controlled social contact while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Medieval courtship balanced sexual segregation with practical opportunities for meeting potential partners. Religious festivals, harvest celebrations, and village gatherings provided supervised venues where young people could interact. Family oversight remained paramount, but within these constraints, individuals still expressed preferences and developed attractions. As Thomas leads your sister into the simple circular dance, your father watches with the carefully neutral expression of a man aware his daughter is approaching marriageable age, but not yet reconciled to the idea. In most medieval communities, women married between 16 and 22, with men typically several years older, having established some economic foundation first. "She's young yet," your mother reassures him softly, "but it does no harm to look ahead." Looking ahead meant assessing potential matches well before active negotiations began. Parents considered not just economic factors, but compatibility of temperament, physical health, family reputations, and practical skills. A prospective husband's ability to provide stable support mattered more than romantic notions, though genuine cruelty or known vices would typically disqualify otherwise advantageous matches. For your sister, marriage would likely mean remaining within the village or moving to a neighbouring community, continuing a life similar to your mother's. For noble daughters like Lady Eleanor, marriage often meant relocation to distant estates, adapting to unfamiliar households, and navigating new power structures without familiar support networks. The evening ends relatively early. Villagers with dawn work responsibilities can't indulge in late revels like town dwellers or nobles. Your family walks home by moonlight, your sister unusually quiet, perhaps contemplating the evening's small social milestone. "Thomas seems steady," your father comments, breaking the silence. "His father keeps him hard at work in the mill." This simple observation carries approval weight. In medieval assessment of potential sons-in-law, work ethic ranked among the most important qualities. A lazy or unreliable man threatened his entire household's survival in a subsistence economy where margins between sufficiency and hunger remained perpetually narrow. The next morning, work resumes with renewed focus. The manor commission approaches completion, with only finishing details remaining. Your mother inspects each piece meticulously, knowing her reputation depends on consistent quality. "Lady Anne won't accept flaws," she reminds you, as you help fold the finished lengths. "Noble households have choices we don't. They can purchase from town merchants if village work disappoints." This awareness of economic precarity informed medieval craftsmanship. Without modern social safety nets, Maintaining patron relationships through reliable work quality provided essential security. For women especially, whose formal economic options remained limited, reputation for excellence offered rare leverage in an otherwise restrictive system. Midday brings unexpected visitors. Margaret, Lady Anne's chamberlain, accompanied by 2 manor servants. They've come to inspect the completed cloth before final delivery, bringing the remaining payment contingent on quality approval. Your mother welcomes them with appropriate deference but professional confidence, displaying the dyed cloth advantageously in the best available light. Margaret examines each piece carefully, checking colour consistency, weave quality, and finishing details. Lady Anne will be pleased, she finally pronounces. The shade matches her requirements precisely. The approval brings visible relief to your mother's face, though she maintains dignified composure. Margaret counts out the remaining payment, a mix of silver pennies and smaller farthings that represent substantial value in village economic terms. Lady Anne asks if you might also provide linen thread dyed to the same shade, Margaret adds, for embroidery work on household linens. This additional commission confirms your mother's successful transition from occasional supplier to trusted craftswoman in manor household networks. Such relationships provided rare economic stability in medieval women's working lives, where income otherwise fluctuated dramatically with seasons, harvests, and family circumstances. After the manor representatives depart, your mother allows herself a moment of undisguised pride. "We've done well," she tells you, the we, acknowledging your contribution to the family enterprise. She sets aside a small portion of the payment in a separate cloth pouch. "For your dowry," she explains, "a girl should bring something to her marriage beyond just her labour." This practical preparation for your eventual marriage represents typical medieval foresight. Parents began assembling daughters' dowries years before actual marriages occurred, accumulating household goods, textiles, occasionally animals or tools, and sometimes modest cash amounts when circumstances permitted. Unlike noble dowries involving land transfers and political alliances, common women's dowries served primarily practical purposes, providing essential household goods for the new couple and demonstrating the bride's economic value beyond her physical labour. A respectable dowry also improved a woman's status within her new household, particularly in relation to her mother-in-law. The conversation about dowries prompts your sister to mention Thomas again, asking tentative questions about appropriate behaviour toward potential suitors. Your mother's advice balances practical caution with recognition of normal interest. "Be pleasant but not forward," she counsels. "A good man values modesty, but don't be cold either. Marriage should have some warmth between partners." This guidance reflects medieval women's complex navigation of sexual expectations. While virginity before marriage remained the absolute standard for respectable women, successful marriages required basic compatibility and mutual goodwill. Women walked fine lines between maintaining propriety and establishing foundations for workable partnerships. As evening approaches, your father returns from the fields with news that harvest will begin in 3 days. The entire household will participate, with normal activities suspended for this all-hands period of intensive labour. "The Lord Steward says we'll start with the Southfield barley," he reports, "then the wheat on the hill. Weather looks favourable." Harvest represented both communal necessity and rare social opportunity. While physically grueling, it brought the entire community together in shared purpose, temporarily relaxing some social barriers. Young people worked alongside each other, observed potential partners' work ethic directly, and participated in harvest celebrations that permitted greater social mixing than ordinary times. For unmarried women, harvest activities offered particularly important chances to demonstrate domestic and agricultural skills to potential suitors and their families. A woman who worked efficiently, maintained pleasant temperament despite exhaustion, and contributed substantively to communal efforts improved her marital prospects considerably. Your mother begins preparations immediately, adjusting meal plans to support increased physical labour, setting aside clothing appropriate for field work, and organising household tasks to accommodate the disrupted routine. This adaptive management typified medieval women's constant recalibration of resources against changing circumstances. That night, conversation centres on harvest logistics, but beneath this practical discussion runs awareness of social dimensions. Your sister will work near Thomas and his family in the assigned field sections. Your mother will have extended interactions with other village women, exchanging household management strategies and community news. As your family prepares for sleep, the manor bell tolls curfew in the distance. Medieval time followed different patterns than our modern precise measurements. Daylight, church bells, and agricultural necessities structured daily rhythms more than mechanical clocks. Lying on your familiar sleeping pallet, you contemplate the social complexities revealed in recent days. Medieval women navigated intricate systems of reputation, economic necessity, religious expectation, and personal inclination within firmly established boundaries. Yet even within these constraints, they exercised agency through skilled work, strategic relationships, and careful reputation management. Your sister shifts restlessly beside you, perhaps imagining coming harvest interactions with Thomas. Your mother's breathing slows as she drifts towards sleep after another day of skilled production and family oversight. Outside, night creatures rustle in familiar patterns, the medieval darkness complete without artificial illumination. Tomorrow brings more work, more community engagement, more small negotiation of individual desires against collective expectations. The rhythm continues, as it has for generations of women before you, each finding her particular path through the established patterns of medieval existence. Harvest arrives with the intensity medieval communities both dreaded and celebrated. Dawn finds your entire household already awake, chewing on cold bread as you walk toward the fields where golden grain stands ready. The morninged air carries a unique scent, sun-ripened grain, dew-dampened earth, and the collective anticipation of the community gathered for shared purpose. Stay with the women's group, your mother directs as you reach the south field. Mind Goodwife Ellen, she'll show you where to bind the sheaves. The harvest follows ancient patterns of gender-divided but complementary labour. Men swing scythes in long practised arcs, cutting swaths of barley that fall in orderly rows. Women follow behind, gathering and binding the cut grain into sheaves, then arranging these into stooks, upright bundles, to dry in the field. Children dart between workers, carrying water, collecting stray stalks, and delivering messages between field sections. Despite the physically demanding nature of the work, a festive atmosphere prevails. Someone starts a harvesting song, its simple melody designed to synchronize movements and distract from aching muscles. Cut it high, cut it low, bind it quick, and let it go. God's good grain for winter bread, work till every mouth is fed. Songs like these transmitted practical knowledge while creating communal rhythm. Medieval work often incorporated music, not as entertainment separate from labour, but integrated into productive activity itself. Women's work songs particularly preserved techniques, warnings, religious references, and occasional social commentary within seemingly simple verses. By mid-morning, the sun beats down with surprising intensity for autumn. Sweat soaks your kirtle despite the cool start to the day. Your hands, already calloused from daily work, develop fresh blisters from the rough grain stalks and binding twine. Yet stopping isn't an option. The community's winter survival depends on completing the harvest before weather turns. During a brief water break, you notice Thomas working with the men nearby, his movements efficient and steady. At 16, he's recently graduated from boys' tasks to men's work, his place among the scythe-wielders marking this transition to adult status. Your sister, assigned to a different section, nevertheless manages occasional glances in his direction. "Young Thomas works well," comments Goodwife Ellen, following your gaze. "His father trained him properly, not like some boys who rush and waste good grain." This casual assessment carries significant meaning in medieval mate selection. Beyond romantic considerations, practical competence in gender-appropriate work constituted the primary qualification for marriage partners. A husband who harvested carelessly threatened family survival, a wife who brewed poorly wasted precious grain. Community elders observed young people's work performance as direct evidence of their marital suitability. Midday brings brief respite when the manor steward signals the rest period. Workers gather in patches of shade, unwrapping food bundles prepared before dawn. Bread, cheese, perhaps cold meat for those who can afford it. The Lord provides ale to harvesters, recognition that dehydrated workers harvest less efficiently. Your mother uses this break to check on each family member, ensuring adequate food and rest. Medieval women's household management extended beyond home walls into fields, markets, and any space where family members worked. Their oversight maintained collective welfare through individual attention, with experienced women monitoring signs of exhaustion or illness others might overlook. As rest ends and work resumes, you notice Lady Anne and several attendants observing from horseback at the field's edge. Though harvest occurs on manor lands for the Lord's benefit, noble women rarely participated directly in agricultural labour. Yet their presence at key moments demonstrated proper oversight of estate resources, while allowing them to display appropriate concern for the community's welfare. Lady Eleanor rides among the group. Her blue gown, made with dyed cloth similar to your mother's commission, visible even at a distance. Unlike her mother's practical assessment of the work, the young noblewoman's expression suggests curiosity about activities outside her direct experience. The physical labour sustaining her privileged existence remains largely theoretical, rather than embodied knowledge. "They say Lord William arrives tomorrow to finalise the betrothal agreements," whispers a woman working nearby, nodding toward Eleanor. "Poor girl looks terrified." "Better a known terror than an unknown one," responds another practically. "At least he's young and whole, not some ancient lord with 3 wives in the grave already." This exchange reflects both common women's genuine sympathy for noble women's marital vulnerabilities and their simultaneous recognition of relative advantages. While peasant marriages considered compatibility and inclination within economic constraints, noble marriages subordinated personal preferences to political strategy, often sending young women to distant households among strangers. By late afternoon, exhaustion tests even the strongest harvesters. Your arms feel leaden, your lower back screams with each bending motion, and your throat burns with dust despite frequent water. Medieval bodies endured physical demands modern people would find nearly impossible to sustain. day after day of grinding labour without ergonomic tools, pain relief, or labour regulations. Keep the rhythm, encourages an older woman, noticing your slowing pace. Steady work hurts less than stopping and starting. This hard-earned wisdom typifies medieval physical culture, where bodily knowledge transmitted between generations helped workers navigate physically demanding lives. Women particularly developed techniques for preserving strength during repetitive tasks, knowing their labour couldn't pause for discomfort when survival necessities remained unfinished. As the sun begins its descent, the steward finally calls the day's end. The field stands, half-harvested, with neat stooks marking completed sections, while uncut grain awaits tomorrow's labour. Workers gather tools, stretch aching muscles, and begin the tired walk home through golden evening light. Bath night, your mother announces as your family trudges homeward. We can't sleep in harvest dust. Despite popular misconceptions about medieval hygiene, cleanliness remained important within practical constraints. While daily full-body bathing proved impractical without running water and heating fuel, people maintained cleanliness through targeted washing, herbal preparations, and periodic more thorough bathing when resources permitted. At home, water heating begins immediately, with your brother assigned to maintain the fire while you and your sister collect additional wood. Your father repairs a broken binding tool needed for tomorrow's work. Each family member contributes to evening preparations according to established gender and age expectations. The bath itself is a simple affair. A wooden tub placed near the fire filled with heated water and used sequentially by family members. Privacy comes through turned backs rather than separate rooms, with female family members often helping each other wash hard-to-reach areas. Medieval bathing was typically communal within gender groups, reflecting both practical resource conservation and different concepts of bodily privacy. Wash your hair properly, your mother instructs, helping pour rinse water over your sister's head. Harvest dust harbours vermin. This seemingly simple directive connects to extensive medieval knowledge about hygiene and health. While germ theory remained unknown, practical observation had established connections between cleanliness and health. Women particularly maintained this knowledge, overseeing family hygiene practices that combined practical effectiveness with available resources. Clean but exhausted, your family shares a simple evening meal, conversation limited by physical fatigue. The first harvest day always proves hardest, with bodies not yet accustomed to the specific movements required. Tomorrow will bring more manageable pain as muscles adapt to necessary patterns. As darkness gathers, your father surprises everyone by producing a small candle, an expensive luxury normally reserved for emergencies or special occasions. We've earned some light, he says, lighting it carefully. The manor commission payment allows a small extravagance. This modest celebration highlights medieval resource management. Rather than taking prosperity for granted, families made conscious decisions about allocating unexpected income, balancing immediate comfort against long-term security. The candle represents not just light, but recognition of exceptional effort and success. By candlelight, your mother leads evening prayers, another woman's role in medieval household religious practice. While men represented families in public religious spaces, women often maintained daily devotional rhythms within homes, teaching children prayers, observing fasting requirements, and marking religious seasons through domestic preparations. The simple prayers follow familiar patterns. Blessed Mother Mary, protect this house from harm. Saint Benedict, keep evil from our door. Lord Christ, grant us strength for tomorrow's labour. All saints and angels watch over us as we sleep. These domestic prayers reflect medieval religious practices' practical focus. Rather than abstract theology, daily devotion centered on immediate concerns, physical protection, agricultural success, family health, peaceful sleep. Saints addressed directly like familiar friends rather than distant figures, with specific saints invoked for particular needs. Your younger brother falls asleep during prayers, his small body surrendering to exhaustion. Your mother continues without interruption, accustomed to the realities of family devotion amid physical limitations. Medieval religious practice accommodated human frailty while maintaining expected observances. Tomorrow the priest will bless the fields at dawn, your father mentions as prayers conclude. We should arrive early for good fortune. This blend of formal Christianity with agricultural folk practices typified medieval rural religion. Church doctrine and pre-Christian customs merged in harvest rituals, with priests blessing fields while communities simultaneously observed traditional practices believed to ensure abundant yields. Despite exhaustion, your sister whispers a question as you prepare for sleep. Do you think Thomas noticed me binding near his section? The innocent query bridges centuries of human experience. Despite vastly different social contexts, medieval young women experienced recognizable emotions around attraction and potential partnerships. The forms these feelings took might differ from modern expressions, but the underlying human experiences share fundamental similarities. He'd be blind not to notice you, you assure her. You worked faster than anyone in our line. This exchange highlights medieval courtship's practical foundations. Demonstrating work competence genuinely attracted potential partners because household survival depended on complementary skills. A woman's binding speed and neatness revealed as much about her marital suitability as her appearance. Sleep comes almost instantly for everyone, the deep physical exhaustion of harvest labor overwhelming even racing young minds. Medieval sleep patterns followed natural light rhythms more closely than our modern schedules, with seasonal adjustments to sleeping hours as daylight expanded or contracted through the year. Dawn arrives too soon, with roosters crowing and church bells signaling another workday. Your body protests each movement, muscles stiff from unaccustomed labor. Medieval bodies endured this seasonal intensification of already demanding physical work through necessity rather than choice. Hurry, your mother urges, already dressed and preparing breakfast. The field blessing happens before work begins. The entire village gathers in the half-harvested field as sunrise paints the eastern sky pink and gold. The parish priest, wearing his simplest vestments to avoid grain dust damaging finer garments, carries a small container of holy water and a prayer book. Field blessings followed standardized liturgy while incorporating local customs. The priest walks the field boundaries, sprinkling holy water while reciting Latin prayers most villagers cannot understand but trust nevertheless. Women particularly maintain secondary rituals alongside official ceremonies, specific field herbs gathered at precise moments, traditional patterns for first and last sheaves, protective gestures at field corners. A good blessing, your father approves as the ceremony concludes. The harvest will prosper. This confidence reflects medieval integration of religious practice with material necessity. Faith wasn't abstract but embedded in daily survival, with divine assistance sought through established channels for immediate physical needs. Women especially maintained this practical spirituality, aligning household activities with religious observances and seasonal transitions. Work resumes with bodies slightly less reluctant than yesterday. The harvest rhythm establishes itself more naturally now, with experienced workers falling into efficient patterns while guiding those with less practice. By midday, progress exceeds the steward's expectations, raising hopes for completing this field before weather changes. "We'll celebrate St. Bartholomew's feast when the barley's in," announces the village reeve during the rest break. "The Lord has granted use of the great barn for dancing." This news energizes tired workers. Medieval agricultural labour incorporated celebration at key transition points, with successful harvests particularly marked through communal festivities. Unlike modern distinct separation of work from leisure, medieval communities integrated celebration into work cycles, with feasts providing both religious observance and necessary physical recovery between labour periods. Your sister's eyes brighten at the mention of dancing, though she carefully avoids looking toward Thomas. Harvest celebrations traditionally included controlled opportunities for young people's social interactions, with community oversight maintaining appropriate boundaries while allowing potential matches to assess compatibility. "You'll need to clean your good kirtle for the feast," your mother notes practically. "The blue one shows your eyes well." This comment reveals medieval women's awareness of appearance despite different beauty standards from our own. While cosmetics remained largely limited to noble women, peasant women nevertheless considered how clothing colours complemented natural features, how hair arrangements flattered face shapes, and how modest adornments might enhance without violating social expectations. The afternoon brings an unexpected moment when harvest rows bring you near Lady Eleanor's observation position. Up close, her fine clothing's detailed embroidery and careful construction become apparent. The material results of countless hours of female artisanal labour transformed into status markers for those who commissioned rather than created them. Eleanor smiles tentatively, breaking usual status boundaries with unexpected human connection. "Your mother's cloth is beautiful," she comments softly. "The blue perfectly matches what I requested." This brief interaction crosses typical medieval social divides. While nobility and peasantry occupied seemingly separate worlds, women's domestic and textile production created occasional bridges between classes. A noble woman might recognize quality handwork. A peasant woman might glimpse the ultimate destination of her careful crafting. "My mother will be pleased you're satisfied, my lady," you respond with appropriate deference, while inside marvelling at this direct communication from someone whose decisions could significantly impact village welfare. The exchange ends quickly as propriety reasserts itself, but leaves you with complicated feelings about class divisions. Medieval social hierarchy wasn't just external structure, but internalized understanding of one's proper place. While modern people might resent such limitations, medieval consciousness generally accepted social stratification as natural divine ordering rather than arbitrary human arrangement. By day's end, the barley field stands fully harvested, golden stooks drying in orderly rows across the landscape. Tomorrow will bring wheat harvest, considered more valuable but also more physically demanding due to its different growth pattern and heavier seed heads. The tired procession homeward includes stops at the village well, where women gather briefly despite exhaustion. This seemingly casual congregation serves important social purposes: information exchange, conflict resolution, relationship maintenance, with women's apparently incidental conversations maintaining community cohesion through intentional communication networks. "Marjorie's oldest boy fell ill during harvest," reports one woman. "Fever and coughing. She needs help with her field section tomorrow." Without discussion, women immediately organise support. One offers to send her daughter to watch Marjorie's younger children, another will deliver soup this evening, a third will join Marjorie's harvest section to compensate for her divided attention. This spontaneous mutual assistance exemplifies medieval women's community care networks, functioning without formal organisation but through established patterns of reciprocal support. Evening brings another bath, another simple meal, another early bedtime. The candle remains unlit tonight, preserved for future need as the household returns to ordinary resource management. Medieval prosperity existed on continuums of sufficiency rather than abundance, with most families experiencing fluctuating rather than stable material circumstances. As sleep approaches, your mother mentions preparations for the coming feast day. We'll need to bake special bread, she notes, mental calculations already assessing flour reserves against celebration needs, and perhaps use some of the new honey for a sweet treat. This advanced planning typifies medieval women's household management. Regular religious feasts punctuated ordinary subsistence, requiring additional preparation while providing psychological refreshment through anticipated celebration. Women particularly maintained these feast preparations, translating abstract church calendar observances into tangible experiences through food, decoration, and ritual. "I'm thinking Thomas might request the first dance," your sister whispers after your mother's breathing deepens into sleep. Mary says his mother spoke well of our family at the well today. This seemingly casual observation reveals medieval courtship's community dimension. Individual attraction remained embedded within family assessments and village approval, with mothers particularly serving as proxies for initial interest exploration. A potential match gained momentum through widening circles of family support rather than isolated individual decisions. "His mother makes sense," you whisper back. "Your spinning is the finest among the younger girls, and Thomas's family needs good cloth for the mill trade." This practical assessment doesn't diminish emotional elements, but contextualizes them within medieval marriage's economic foundation. Compatibility encompassed work skills, resource contributions, and family alliances alongside personal affinity. Women particularly evaluated potential matches through this comprehensive lens, considering both immediate appeal and long-term household viability. Sleep claims you mid-conversation, your body's demands overriding even interesting speculation. Medieval physical existence prioritized recovery for essential labor, with social considerations necessarily secondary to baseline survival requirements. Dawn arrives with disturbing news. Rain clouds gathering in the western sky threaten the wheat harvest. The entire village mobilizes with increased urgency, breakfast hastily consumed while watching the horizon. Your mother packs extra food, anticipating extended work hours to beat the approaching weather. "Pray the rain holds off until evening," your father says grimly as you hurry toward the wheat field. "Wet grain rots in the stook." The potential crop loss carries severe consequences in medieval subsistence agriculture. Without modern crop insurance, storage technology, or transportation networks, failed harvests meant genuine hunger, with families experiencing everything from uncomfortable scarcity to actual starvation, depending on reserve resources and community support structures. The wheat field's harvest begins with frantic energy, workers pushing physical limits against threatening skies. The priest arrives mid-morning, offering prayers for weather intervention, while the steward reorganizes work sections for maximum efficiency. Medieval communities mobilized all available resources, spiritual and practical, when facing natural threats. Women's work patterns adapt immediately to the emergency conditions. Older women with experience reading weather signs position themselves at field edges, monitoring cloud movements while calling encouragement and time estimates to workers. Younger women with greater strength and speed take central positions in harvest lines, maximizing efficiency where most needed. This spontaneous reorganization highlights medieval women's operational flexibility within seemingly rigid gender divisions. While maintaining established task boundaries, women adjusted work patterns to address immediate necessities, their collective experience navigating previous emergencies translating into effective crisis response. By midday, dark clouds loom directly overhead, but nearly 3/4 of the wheat stands safely harvested. Workers refuse the usual rest break, continuing through growing discomfort as occasional raindrops signal the storm's imminent arrival. "Another hour," calls the steward. "Work toward the northern section, it's most exposed to wind damage." This strategic prioritization reflects medieval agricultural knowledge built through generations of observation. Certain field sections, based on elevation, soil composition, and wind exposure, required priority protection during weather threats. This knowledge, transmitted through both formal instruction and embedded practice, informed emergency harvest decisions. The first serious rainfall begins with enough wheat remaining that complete harvest becomes impossible. The steward makes rapid calculations, directing workers to focus on areas most likely to produce seed grain for next year's planting. This difficult choice prioritizes community survival over individual households, preserving future viability at the cost of immediate sufficiency. Women participate actively in these emergency assessments. Though formal authority rests with male officials, experienced women contribute crucial observations about grain quality, soil drainage patterns, and potential storage adaptations. Their knowledge, while not officially acknowledged in decision hierarchies, nevertheless shapes collective responses to crisis. As rain intensity increases, the steward finally calls work stoppage. Harvesters gather tools and secured grain with practiced efficiency, their movements expressing frustration but not panic. Medieval communities experienced regular agricultural setbacks, developing both practical and psychological resilience through repeated adaptation to natural disruptions. The walk home occurs through steadily increasing rainfall, with women creating makeshift protection for children and elders using harvesting cloths. Your mother maintains encouraging conversation despite obvious concern, her calm demeanour providing emotional stability amid disappointing circumstances. "We salvaged more than in the great storm 5 years past," she reminds your visibly worried father, "and the barley came in complete." This contextualizing of current setbacks against historical experiences typifies medieval resilience strategies. By placing present difficulties within longer time frames, communities maintained perspective that prevented despair while acknowledging genuine challenges. Women particularly preserved these narrative continuities, connecting current experiences to ancestral patterns of survival through hardship. At home, wet clothing creates additional work despite exhaustion. Medieval fabric required careful drying to prevent mildew and rot, with wool particularly vulnerable to damage from improper moisture management. Your mother organizes drying rotation near the fire, prioritizing work garments needed for tomorrow's continued harvest attempt. "If the rain stops by morning, we might still secure the eastern section," your father says, studying the sky through the doorway. "The drainage there prevents worst flooding." This continuous reassessment reflects medieval adaptation rather than resignation to natural forces. While acknowledging weather's power, agricultural communities maintained active response strategies, adjusting plans continuously rather than abandoning efforts entirely. Women's contribution to this resilience included both practical support for revised work plans and emotional maintenance of family morale. Evening prayers take on particular intensity given the day's challenges. Your mother leads extended invocations to specific saints associated with weather and harvest, including local regional favourites alongside universal Catholic figures. This layered religious practice combined official church teachings with local traditions, creating spiritual frameworks directly relevant to immediate community needs. St. Swithin, calm your waters. St. Benedict, preserve our grain. Holy Mother, protect our stores. Christ our Lord, sustain us through winter's pain. These prayer adaptations highlight medieval women's religious agency within established boundaries. While formal liturgy remained male-controlled, domestic devotional practice allowed women considerable flexibility in addressing immediate concerns through spiritual frameworks. This practical spirituality connected abstract religious principles to tangible daily needs. Despite disappointment and exhaustion, your mother initiates conversation about the upcoming feast day, maintaining normal planning despite abnormal circumstances. This deliberate continuation of routine amid disruption served important psychological functions in medieval crisis management, with women particularly preserving ordinary rhythms that reinforced community stability. We'll still celebrate the harvest, she insists, even if smaller than hoped. God's bounty deserves acknowledgement, whether abundant or modest. This theological perspective reflects medieval religious integration with material reality. Rather than separating spiritual life from physical circumstances, medieval Catholicism encompassed both prosperity and hardship within religious frameworks, with gratitude expected regardless of outcome. Women particularly maintained these balanced religious interpretations that acknowledge difficulty without abandoning faith. As bedtime approaches, the rain continues steadily, eliminating hope for early morning harvest resumption. Your father sits longer than usual by the dying fire, his silence conveying concern about winter stores more clearly than words. Medieval men carried primary official responsibility for family provision, though women's active economic contributions proved equally essential to survival. Your mother eventually places a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We've weathered worse," she says simply. "Together, as always." This quiet exchange captures medieval partnership's essence beneath formal patriarchal structures. While official authority remained male, practical household management operated through complementary contributions, with resilience emerging from combined rather than individual resources. Women's emotional labour particularly sustained family cohesion during material challenges. The rain's steady drumming on the thatch creates soothing backdrop for sleep. Medieval attunement to natural rhythms included accommodating rather than resisting weather patterns, with indoor activities adjusted to precipitation cycles. Women particularly mastered this flexible scheduling, reorganizing household tasks to align with environmental conditions. As you drift towards sleep, medieval reality's fundamental uncertainty emerges clearly through harvest disruption. Unlike modern assumptions of relative stability and predictable outcomes, medieval existence embraced contingency as normal condition rather than exception. Women's adaptability particularly developed through navigating this inherent unpredictability, creating flexible response systems for inevitable disruptions. Sleep comes despite concerns, your body's demands overriding mental activity. Medieval physical existence prioritized recovery necessities even amid legitimate worries, with survival requiring continued function despite incomplete resolution. Tomorrow will bring new assessments, revised plans, and continued community effort regardless of tonight's rain outcome. Dreams blend wheat fields with blue cloth, harvest songs with manna commissions, sisters' courtship with Eleanor's betrothal. Medieval women's consciousness navigated multiple simultaneous concerns across social boundaries, their attention necessarily divided between immediate tasks and longer-term considerations. Even in sleep, these layered responsibilities find expression through connected rather than compartmentalized awareness. Morning arrives with unexpected brightness. The rain has stopped, leaving puddles reflecting a clear blue sky. Your father is already up, standing in the doorway studying weather conditions with the calculating gaze of someone whose survival depends on accurate assessment. The south-facing slopes will dry first, he announces as the family stirs. The steward will direct us there to salvage what we can. This immediate pivot from disappointment to practical response typifies medieval resilience. Rather than dwelling on lost grain, attention shifts to maximizing what remains recoverable. The ability to absorb setbacks without surrendering to despair wasn't just psychological strength, but survival necessity in a world where margins between sufficiency and hunger remained perpetually narrow. Your mother is already reorganizing the day's household tasks, adjusting cooking plans to accommodate wet field harvest, while simultaneously preparing for the upcoming feast. This mental flexibility characterized medieval women's management skills, maintaining multiple timelines simultaneously while adapting each to changing circumstances. We'll need extra drying cloths, she tells your sister, and everyone should wear their wooden clogs in the field today. These practical adaptations reflect medieval problem-solving grounded in generational experience. Knowledge about managing wet harvests passed through family lines, with specific techniques for grain recovery, mold prevention, and modified processing for dampened crops. Women particularly preserved these practical adaptations, translating abstract concerns about crop damage into specific preventative actions. Breakfast consists of yesterday's leftover bread and thin porridge, simple fare designed for quick consumption rather than satisfaction. Medieval meals flexed with work demands, with substantial cooking reserved for times when labour allowed proper preparation and consumption. During harvest crisis, food became fuel rather than experience, with taste secondary to sustaining energy. The walk to the fields reveals both damage and hope. Some wheat sections lie flattened by rain, the grain heads pressed into mud and effectively lost. Other areas, particularly on slopes where water drained quickly, stand reasonably intact despite dampness. The community will suffer losses but not catastrophe, a distinction medieval agricultural communities recognized through painful experience. The steward has already reorganized work sections, prioritizing salvageable areas while reluctantly abandoning worst affected portions. This triage approach reflected medieval pragmatism. When complete recovery proved impossible, resources concentrated where effectiveness remained possible, rather than dispersing into futile efforts. Women with harvesting knives take the slope edges, he directs. The grain there's too wet for scythes but can be cut individually. This adjustment demonstrates medieval work flexibility within gender boundaries, while maintaining the basic division between men's and women's tasks. Specific implementations shifted with conditions. Rather than rigid adherence to normal patterns, practical necessity dictated appropriate adaptations that preserved underlying principles while addressing immediate challenges. Work begins with determined focus rather than yesterday's urgency. Medieval crisis response followed distinct phases. Initial emergency mobilization followed by sustained adaptive effort. The community has transitioned to this second phase, conserving energy for what promises to be more physically demanding work under less favorable conditions. Your assigned section requires harvesting individual wheat stalks with a small blade rather than gathering pre-cut swaths. The work proves painfully slow compared to normal methods, with mud-splattered stalks requiring careful handling to preserve precious grain. Each handful represents future bread, security against winter hunger, seed for next year's planting. "Like this," demonstrates an older woman, showing how to cut low on the stalk while keeping the grain head elevated above mud. Shake off the worst wet before adding it to your bundle. This knowledge transmission illustrates medieval learning patterns. Formal education remained rare, but practical skill development occurred continuously through direct demonstration and supervised practice. Women particularly excelled at teaching through integrated activity, combining verbal instruction with physical guidance and contextual explanation. By midday, progress remains dishearteningly slow, but the improved weather holds. The sun's warmth gradually dries field edges, allowing some sections to transition back to standard harvesting methods. Medieval agricultural recovery often occurred incrementally rather than dramatically, with patience and persistence compensating for limited technological solutions. During the brief midday rest, conversation turns to the coming feast day. Despite yesterday's setbacks, celebration plans continue, a testament to medieval integration of hardship within community rhythms rather than allowing difficulties to disrupt essential social functions. "The brewing began 3 days ago," reports an older woman. "The ale should be ready by feast night." "And I've dried apples saved from last fall," adds another. "Enough for a special pudding if flour can be spared." This feast planning amid crop crisis might seem contradictory to modern sensibilities, but reflects medieval understanding of celebration's essential rather than optional nature. Communal gatherings provided psychological resilience, religious observance, and social cohesion necessary for continued cooperative effort. Women particularly maintained these celebration preparations regardless of material circumstances, recognizing their importance beyond mere enjoyment. After the rest period, the manor bell tolls unexpectedly. Heads turn toward the sound, conversations pausing mid-sentence. Unscheduled bell ringing usually signals emergency, fire, attack, or other immediate threat requiring community response. A messenger from the bishop calls the reeve, striding between work sections. All are summoned to hear the proclamation. Workers set down tools with reluctance but without question. Medieval authority structures, while allowing considerable practical autonomy in daily operations, expected immediate compliance with formal directives. The community gathers near the field edge where a mounted rider in church livery waits with an official-looking document. "By authority of His Grace the Bishop," the messenger begins formally, "in recognition of harvest emergency throughout the diocese, dispensation is granted for Sunday labour until crops are secured. The Lord's Day obligation may be fulfilled through abbreviated prayer at dawn before fieldwork commences." A ripple of relief passes through the gathered crowd. This practical accommodation demonstrates medieval Catholicism's adaptability despite apparent rigidity. While Sabbath labour prohibitions remained serious religious obligations, church authorities recognize legitimate emergency exceptions, particularly for activities directly connected to community survival. The priest will offer special blessing at Saturday Vespers, the messenger continues, with indulgence granted to all who participate in community harvest assistance. This official response to agricultural crisis illustrates medieval integration of religious and practical concerns. Rather than treating spiritual obligations and physical necessities as separate domains, medieval systems sought accommodation that respected both while prioritizing community welfare. Women particularly navigated these integrated domains, maintaining religious observances while adapting practical work to emergency conditions. As workers return to their assigned sections, conversations reflect cautious optimism. The additional day's labour might compensate for rain losses, preventing worst-case winter shortages. Medieval communities lived perpetually with uncertainty, but developed both practical and psychological tools for navigating variable outcomes between disaster and prosperity. "God provides," comments an elderly woman nearby, her gnarled hands never pausing in their careful grain gathering. One door closes, another opens. This theological perspective reflects medieval women's spiritual resilience. Rather than questioning divine goodness amid hardship, they incorporated difficulties within comprehensive worldviews that assumed ultimate benevolent purpose behind immediate challenges. This framework provided psychological stability amid material instability, allowing continued function despite legitimate anxiety. The afternoon progresses with steady work, grain accumulating in salvaged bundles while unsalvageable sections are reluctantly abandoned. Your mother works nearby, her movements efficient despite visible fatigue. Medieval women's bodies endured physical demands far exceeding modern experience, developing specific strength through necessity rather than choice. Lady Anne sent word that she's postponed the new thread commission until after harvest, your mother mentions during a brief water break. She understands our priorities now. This consideration from the manor demonstrates medieval class interdependence despite hierarchy. While formal authority remained aristocratic, practical recognition of peasant priorities during agricultural crisis benefited both groups. Women particularly maintained these cross-class communications, their domestic and textile work creating natural contact points for pragmatic accommodation. As afternoon fades toward evening, the steward assesses progress with cautious approval. "Better than expected," he announces. "Another 2 days should secure the salvageable portions." This assessment triggers visible relief throughout the work groups. Medieval emotional responses to crisis followed distinct patterns: initial alarm, focused response, and eventually measured relief when catastrophe appeared averted. This emotional regulation developed through repeated experience with environmental uncertainty, creating resilience through practiced recovery rather than absence of disruption. The walk home occurs through mud-slicked paths, workers carrying salvaged grain bundles for additional drying near household fires. Medieval harvest involved not just field work but extended processing to transform raw grain into storable food. Women particularly managed this transition from field to storage, their household oversight extending to critical preservation techniques. At home, your mother immediately arranges the salvaged grain bundles near the fire, positioning them for optimal drying without scorching. "We'll need to turn them every hour until bedtime," she instructs, already calculating necessary care against available family energy. This meticulous attention reflects medieval women's perpetual risk management. Small details, improper drying, insufficient turning, inadequate storage preparation could transform salvageable resources into unusable waste. Women's household management particularly focused on these crucial transition points where potential value could be either preserved or lost. Supper preparation occurs simultaneously with grain management, your mother's attention divided between multiple essential tasks. Medieval women developed remarkable capability for parallel processing, maintaining awareness of multiple household systems while addressing immediate needs. This cognitive flexibility emerged through necessity rather than natural inclination, as household survival depended on simultaneous rather than sequential task management. The meal itself is simple but slightly more substantial than breakfast. Pottage enriched with saved bacon pieces, bread, and small cups of ale. Your father discusses tomorrow's work plan between careful bites, mentally mapping field sections against weather predictions and available labour. Thomas and his father volunteered to help clear our section tomorrow, he mentions, with a meaningful glance toward your sister. They've finished their own area already. This casual announcement carries significant social implications, offering harvest assistance to a potential marriage partner's family demonstrated both practical support and serious intention. While modern courtship might involve expensive gifts or elaborate dates, medieval relationship development occurred through pragmatic contributions to household welfare. Your sister blushes but continues eating without comment. Medieval courtship proceeded through community and family channels rather than direct interaction, with parents negotiating progressive contact within established propriety boundaries. Women particularly maintained these courtship regulations, ensuring proper social integration of potential relationships. Evening activities center on drying the salvaged grain, with family members taking turns rotating bundles near the fire. This essential task transforms potential waste into preserved food through careful attention rather than complex technology. Women's oversight of these preservation processes directly translated into winter survival options, their seemingly mundane household management determining family welfare more directly than more visible male-dominated activities. As darkness deepens, your mother leads evening prayers with particular attention to weather petitions and harvest protection. Medieval religion wasn't compartmentalized from daily concerns, but directly addressed immediate practical needs alongside spiritual development. Women's religious practice particularly emphasized this integration, bringing abstract theology into conversation with concrete household welfare. Preparations for tomorrow include laying out dry clothing, checking harvest tools for damage, and organizing food that can be carried and eaten quickly in the fields. These practical readiness measures reflect medieval women's anticipatory thinking, their household management extending beyond immediate needs to encompass short and medium-term preparation. I've set aside flour for the feast bread despite everything, your mother mentions as bedtime approaches. We'll manage both harvest and celebration. This seemingly minor comment reveals medieval women's remarkable capacity for maintaining normal social rhythms amid crisis. Rather than abandoning celebration during difficulty, they recognized communal gatherings as essential to collective resilience rather than optional luxuries. This integration of celebration within hardship provided psychological sustainability through connections between present challenges and traditional continuities. As the family prepares for sleep, exhaustion evident in every movement, your father makes a rare direct expression of appreciation. You've managed well, he tells your mother. The manor commission, the harvest crisis, preparations for the feast, all while keeping the household functioning. This acknowledgement reflects medieval recognition of women's essential contributions despite formal subordinate status. While official authority structures positioned men as household heads, practical awareness of women's crucial management role created genuine appreciation within these hierarchical frameworks. Women's value emerged through demonstrated capability rather than theoretical equality, creating respect within rather than despite established gender systems. Your mother accepts the compliment with simple dignity. "We all do what necessity requires," she responds, "as those before us did and those after us will." This perspective illustrates medieval temporal consciousness, individual experiences connected to both ancestral patterns and future continuations, creating meaning through participation in extended community rather than isolated personal achievement. Women particularly maintain these temporal connections, their daily activities consciously linking past traditions with future provisions. Final bedtime preparations include checking that salvaged grain remains safely drying, securing the door against nocturnal animals, and ensuring water stands ready for morning needs. These routine security measures reflect medieval risk management within ordinary household functions. Women's oversight particularly focused on these transition boundaries between waking and sleeping vulnerability, their household protection extending into periods when active supervision paused. As you settle onto your sleeping pallet, body aching from unaccustomed harvest labour, your sister whispers one last comment before sleep. "I hope the feast happens as planned. Thomas's mother says he plays the pipe well enough for dancing." This seemingly frivolous concern amid agricultural crisis illustrates medieval integration of practical survival with social development. Even during harvest emergency, potential relationships maintained importance within community continuation. Women particularly preserved these social processes alongside material concerns, recognizing their equivalent necessity for community perpetuation. "The feast will happen," you assure her drowsily. "Mother always manages everything, regardless of circumstances." This confidence reflects medieval children's security within maternal household management. Despite external uncertainty, women's consistent domestic oversight created psychological stability through practical reliability. Children particularly benefited from this maternal consistency, developing basic, trust through experience dependability rather than promise protection. Sleep approaches with the deep exhaustion unique to agricultural labour. Medieval bodies experienced physical demands beyond modern comprehension, developing specific strengths and tolerances through necessity rather than choice. The agricultural cycle imposed its rhythms on human experience, with harvest particularly demanding maximum physical expenditure against limited recovery time. Your last conscious awareness includes rain beginning again outside, gentle rather than threatening, but still concerning for tomorrow's salvage efforts. Medieval weather consciousness remained perpetually alert, with precipitation patterns directly impacting daily welfare rather than merely influencing convenience. Even in near sleep, environmental awareness continued monitoring critical survival factors. The night deepens around the sleeping household, medieval darkness absolute without artificial illumination. Wind moves around the cottage eaves, rain patters softly on thatch, nocturnal animals venture cautiously into human-adjacent territories. The natural world proceeds through its patterns regardless of agricultural crisis, its rhythms continuing beyond immediate human concerns. Inside, sleeping bodies generate shared warmth against autumn chill. Medieval sleep patterns adapted to environmental conditions rather than controlling them, with physical proximity providing practical heat conservation without modern heating technology. Family members' breathing synchronizes unconsciously, creating gentle rhythm beneath occasional shifting positions or sleep murmurs. Dreams blend recent experiences with deeper concerns, harvest worries, courtship possibilities, manor commissions, feast preparations. Medieval consciousness processed multiple simultaneous responsibilities even during sleep, integrating practical concerns with social obligations and future projections. Women's dreams particularly reflected this integrated awareness, their responsibilities spanning immediate household welfare and longer-term community continuation. Medieval women's lives encompassed contradictions modern perspectives struggle to reconcile. Formal subordination alongside practical authority, limited official options alongside creative adaptations, structured constraints alongside meaningful agency. Their experiences reflected neither helpless oppression nor anachronistic equality, but complex navigation of established systems through practical capability and strategic compliance. What would these women think of us, with our heated homes, abundant food options, and remarkable freedom of choice? Perhaps they would envy our material security and expanded opportunities. Perhaps they would question our isolation from community and natural rhythms. Most likely they would recognize our shared humanity beneath these profound differences, our common hopes for security, purpose, connection, and meaning, despite vastly different expressions across centuries. As dawn approaches, preparing to wake this sleeping medieval household for another day of harvest challenge, we leave them to their dreams. Their world, simultaneously harder and simpler than our own, continues without our observation, its patterns established through generations of practical adaptation to environmental and social realities beyond individual control. In your comfortable modern bed, perhaps you've gained appreciation for these women across time, their remarkable resilience, practical wisdom, and essential contributions to human continuation. Their lives may seem foreign in external details, yet familiar in fundamental concerns. Different circumstances, similar humanity. Sleep now in your soft, warm bed, your body free from harvest labor, your mind drifting toward dreams very different from those of medieval women. Yet perhaps, in some small way, connected through shared human experience across the centuries that separate you from their world of intense emotion, practical necessity, and remarkably adaptive capability. Sleep. Knowing those who came before managed challenges we can barely imagine, finding purpose and meaning within constraints we've long forgotten. Their strength flows through time, contributing to the world that eventually produced your comparatively gentle existence. Sleep, connected to that remarkable human continuity, resting in the security others created through centuries of careful attention to survival necessities we now take for granted. Sleep, appreciating the medieval women whose daily efforts, generation after generation, helped create the world where rest